our plate. I am going to start. I'd like to welcome everyone to the virtual planning board meeting of January 24th. And right now I'd like to take a call to order to ensure we have a quorum. Ms. Creighton.
Here.
Ms. Delicio sent me an email a few minutes ago saying she had a family emergency and won't be joining us tonight. Ms. Foley.
Here.
Mr. Gilbert.
Hello.
Okay, sounds like you're here. Mr. Olney.
Yes, I'm here.
And Ms. Tenney.
Here.
Thank you. Looks like we have a quorum tonight. I'd like to remind all board members, guests, to be asked to be recognized by the chair if you wish to speak. This meeting is being recorded. And with that said, I'd like to get into our agenda. First topic is acknowledge receipt of correspondence. We had a City of Gloucester meeting notice that was in your packet. And then on the 22nd over the weekend, which didn't get into the agenda, we had a letter from Ms. Iavoni on the 40A. And subsequently, we had a letter today, which I think she sent to all board members on, topic was Mr. Bobrowski. At this point, I'd like to open the floor up to the public who has any comments at this time with something that's not on the agenda. Your time would be limited as we have a large agenda tonight. Any public member would like to speak to the board? Okay, with that said, I'd like to get into our first topic. Hopefully we can get through this. We have a public hearing at 7, so I'd like to start with the update from meetings with cell signaling technologies, research facility proposal update. And I understand Mr. Gilbert and Ms. Creighton met with Mr. Bobrowski et al. And if they could update us at this time.
Sure. We did meet and we have some collective proposed zoning changes. We can take, do you want to actually get right into that discussion right now, Ron? Basically, you know, I think I can lead a discussion on that if you want for a minutes.
Yes, I wouldn't mind. I wouldn't mind taking that out of order.
Okay.
If we think we can get through it in the half hour prior to the scheduled public hearing, that'd be great.
Okay. So we did meet with Mark Lovsky and Peter Godot. Gary and I did, and talked through the zoning changes that they had presented to us, broadly speaking. And I thought at least it would be useful before we get into those zoning changes that we just as a group talk about our larger intent and make sure we're all in agreement. I think there's a presumption that these changes shouldn't, you know, that we're reviewing the changes, and in your packet there was a draft, and Gary I know has highlighted the zoning with yellow changes, and I think you've seen that as well as the proposed zoning changes. But I thought it would be, do you mind just sharing the screen with me, Ron?
Yep, you should have control.
Okay, hold on, let me just slide over here. So I think that I just thought it would be useful to talk about, can you see my screen? Do we want to advance changes to the LCD to facilitate the commercial lab type use? Rather than, if the answer to that is no, then the whole question is moot. But I thought that it would be good to have a general consensus, and that it's, so that use is currently allowed west of Pine Street. And then the other issues that are before us are the height of any buildings, Just, they asked for a 55-foot height plus any roof equipment. Just for your reference, the high school is about 55 feet. They also asked about building setbacks, parking setbacks, reducing or eliminating the buffer between parking and 128, allowing greater lot coverage and allowing multiple buildings on a lot. So I thought it would be just useful. I think the presumption at the last meeting was that this issue around, do we want to advance changes in the LCD to facilitate a commercial lab use, was positively received, but I thought it would be useful just to make sure that we're all on the same page so that we don't waste our time.
I had a question, and maybe the applicant can answer. Is there a biosafety level categorization of what's being proposed up there? I think there's a rating system of 1 to 4 on level degrees of contamination.
So we did talk about that in one of our meetings, and I think I asked the question, is it 2, 3, or 4? And the answer was no, but I'm not sure if it's a 0 or a 1. So maybe one of the somebody from Self Signaling could answer that question.
I think Peter might be able to answer that.
And I'm afraid I can't answer with a figure. Everything we've learned is that their use is very benign, but why don't I try quickly to see if I can get my hands on that number, unless Chris or somebody else from the company knows.
My question would be, do we want to restrict it to a certain bio level, not greater than, because I think bio level 4 is like anthrax or something like that. And I'm just wondering if the board would want to consider some kind of.
If I may,
Yes.
that could be part of a condition that would be reviewed when the special permit application is before the planning board. Obviously, I think there's a little confusion as to whether we're asking for this as a right or by special permit. And in an ideal world, it would be great to have it as a right. But from the very beginning, we anticipated that the planning board would want a thorough review of any project. And consequently, we anticipated it would be a special permit process as it presently applies to the area west of Pine Street. That's not as a right west of Pine Street, it's by special permit. And if that were the case, then I think that would be an element of discussion at that time. If it's as a right, then I would agree with you. You might at this point want to limit the level.
So Ron, if I may.
Yes, Sarah.
It seems to me that we need to think about this as a zoning change, and that when Cell Signaling or any other applicant comes forward, we think about their particular project. So I'll take a stab at least answering my question for my own perspective, that I am for a commercial lab type use by special permit, such as allowed west of Pine Street. I think allowing a 55-foot height with additional allowances by special permit for rooftop equipment is fine. And I think that dramatically reducing the setbacks and lot coverage to facilitate facilitate commercial uses makes sense. So I am in favor of that, but I just think before we waste our time, we should just get us a consensus about if anybody is opposed to these uses.
I'll go around the board. Ms. Foley.
Hi, thank you. I will agree. I am in favor of this type of facility in the limited commercial district. My questions or concerns would be, are we saying for that all of the LCD for the hundreds of acres that it could be all of these reduced requirements? They could be 55 feet, reduced setbacks, reduce, reduce lot coverage. I think I would have a little harder time doing a broad statement like that. I think we would need to do some analysis of how that would look if every building there was 55 feet high. And I do want to put out my concern that what the proximity is to Sawmill Brook and our water supply. Our last reading for forever chemicals was 19.8 and the Massachusetts threshold is 20. So we're really close. So those are my concerns.
Thank you. Mr. Gilbert?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Our signal, I'm up here in Quebec in the country and the signal's weird. I think it has to be allowed as of right. And the kinds of dimensional, loosening of dimensional requirements, I envision would be made specific to commercial uses. And even if we wanted to commercial biotech, we could limit it to the specific kind of use. But I think that they need to know that the use is allowed and that they have certain dimensional parameters they can work with, which are more reasonable than what currently is there. But we do need to have site plan, we do need to have a special permit review and control of the site plan development, absolutely, which takes a lot of things into account. And one of the last things that we were discussing with Mark was the idea of they might need rooftop equipment. That's totally typical for a commercial building. But I thought anything above 55 feet should also be reviewed as part of the special permit. Yes, allowed, but reviewed, in terms of screening, color, placement on the roof kind of issues. And then the big question is, what are the dimensional parameters that we want to vary? And it seems to me for a place like that, the LCD, where there's already a lot of exposed ledge and rock and cleared land, forcing certain setbacks may not be advantageous, because I think a lot of people have spoken about this. We've spoken about this, how we might want to tighten up the usage, have smaller footprints there. So you might even want a 0 front yard setback. If there's a road there, you may want it, depending on the site development, you may want it tight to the road. So I think we might want to have, just have that part of the special permit process or some performance criteria written into the law.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Gilbert. Mr. Olney, any comments?
Yeah, so I think it has to be by special permit, not by right. And if we said laboratory by right, then we're going to get into the question about what level of contamination would we allow, blah, blah, blah. By special permit, I think a lot of all these issues goes away, because the whole use and the special permit, we can establish conditions for setback, for water contamination, all of that can be part of the special permit. So I think just allowing it by special permit is going to give us enough flexibility to deal with meeting both the town concerns and to allow the project to go ahead so the client is satisfied as well. So I think flexibility is the key, especially if we're trying to get something through for the Springtown meeting. And I also want to point out that current zoning says things west of Pine Street, the lab is okay. And then there are 4 or 5 conditions that a special permit would have to have. And some of them are kind of redundant, like that the applicant would have to pay all review fees. Well, that happens anyway. Some of them are kind of silly, requiring an annual certification that all the permits are in place. Well, I don't know why we would need that. It's something that's going to be required anyway. So I think we should look at some of those additional things that are in the current zoning and strip out the things that are redundant and unnecessary.
Thank you, Chris. Laura, Ms. Tenney?
I am supportive of the use and of the height relief by special permit. I think special permit is definitely the right approach here. I would have further concerns about both environmental protection, water resource protection, like Mary mentions, and also view shed protection. So if you're on 128 driving north or south, you see a wooded corridor now, which is by virtue both of the kind of wooded buffer and by the natural topography and the ledge there. So it could be, you know, rather than setting an arbitrary setback, perhaps we put in a performance requirement that allows, you know, any project to be screened by natural means of vegetation and topography rather than, say, you know, fencing or other visual buffers. So I think that we could work those in with performance standards. I wouldn't want to see those relaxed and having impacts on you know, sort of unforeseen elements of visual and environmental impacts.
Thanks, Laura. And the chair is also, I'm also in favor by special permit to protect the water challenges that are up there. Can have peer review. It allows for flexibility. It gives the planning board site review and the town protections. I don't know what airborne things may be released. So I am for this project, but with a special permit.
So then, Ron, if you don't mind, I'll switch then. If it sounds like we have consensus to the actual zoning bylaw changes, is that okay?
I believe so.
Okay, so there are two, we apologize for having two documents out there. This is the document that Gary sent around. There substantially the same with a few minor changes, but I think Gary, this is the most recent. The other is formatted as a article that we've been looking at, so we can translate this into that. I'm sorry, let me just make this bigger. Hold on. Sorry. You can see that now. These are the so in yellow are the changes. And this gets a little complicated because we're also trying to revise sections 1 through 4, section 4. So we'll come back to that point in a bit later when we talk about recodification. I don't think it's as hard as that looks at the first blush, but we'll come back to that. So the first change is where is it? Is this here? I don't know. In 4.4.6, simply removing the limit of the area west of Pine Street as the area where laboratories and establishments devoted to scientific research can be allowed. And this refers, I believe, to special permit. Yes, by special permit, right there, by special permit. Then the second change, so Mary, to your question, that does mean it applies in this case as proposed here to the entire LCD. But remember that there are actually very few parcels in the LCD that are not conservation land. But to answer your question, this proposal would apply throughout the LCD.
And Sarah, see A, B, and C and D underneath that?
Yep.
Those are the sections that I think we might consider getting rid of or adapting in some way.
Yep, I think you're right. Similar.
Chris?
Yes, go ahead.
I don't know if it's been made clear, the strategy we're considering here is the first approach to town meeting would be changing the existing bylaw so that this is locked in place and a possible use. And then the second approach would be if all of our bylaws or a substantial amount of them are adopted, there would need to be another article already filed for town meeting to work this into the new bylaw sections. And part of that first approach to change the existing bylaw, it makes a lot of sense to do a light touch and to try not to change every single paragraph in it. So I would just caution, what you're saying, Chris, makes sense and it's logical, but I would think we want to change the minimum amount.
Let's think.
Point taken, Gary.
Yeah, I think we do. I think Gary and Chris make a good point that we have to think about strategically, as I said, how we're going to do this. I think there's also an easier way, but again, we can get to that in a minute. So then the end, now we jump to section 5, which is height restrictions, and adding to the end of the first sentence. So that would be right here. Be easier. Anyway, no structure shall exceed, I think it should say 3 stories, and the vertical distance is 55 feet. And then chimneys, spires, towers, or rooftop equipment. I think that needs to be added in there. Shall be allowed by special permit. So this needs to be a little bit more adjusted here. But just for
Can I
ref-
ask you, because I was referencing the article for this as well, and I don't know if I should ignore that because that was different than what we're going over here.
well, unfortunately, there were 2 versions going around. I apologize for that. This one came in anyway.
Because the article was including cupolas, tanks, HVAC equipment, solar panels, mechanical apparatuses, and said 15 feet.
Yeah, I think that should be considered the current version.
So what the article says, or what this says here?
What the article says. Because that's,
So why would, and if that's the case, why would
why am I going through this?
no. And I can't say this word right, but the cupolas, isn't that for a house?
Can I weigh in on this? I was suggesting the document, the 1-page document you saw came from Mark Klevsky, sorry. I would suggest that you remove chimneys, spires, and towers because nobody has any need for those when you have a 50-foot tall commercial building. It really should be oriented specifically towards the kind of language Mark Klevsky proposed about mechanical equipment, which is necessary. And the kinds of things we would do to that would be to screen it or discuss the color or the location on the roof.
Do we want to add screening to that word?
Well, that's what you do in a special permit review. I mean, you can make suggestions as to what the planning board would consider when they're doing their special permit review, if you want to work some of that language into the text, but it's kind of obvious or implied, I think, when you're doing your review.
Can you see that this is what Mary's referring to?
I would think Mark Klevsky would agree there's no need for chimneys, cupolas, spires, or towers.
Well, I don't, because this also applies to houses, and consequently it needs to stay in there. What we're doing is adding to it those appurtenances and equipment which would be on the top of a commercial building, and we're providing that they can go as high as 15 feet. I would suggest that maybe you don't need a special permit, a special permit to do the 15 feet above 55, because it's already going to be part of the special permit process. And
Right.
If during the special permit process, we don't provide adequate screening for those things, or the right color, as Gary said, then you would have an opportunity at that point to modify the application.
I agree.
Mhm.
So I guess this is Mary again, I'm vastly confused because section 4.4 lists what commercial endeavors we're talking about, and it's not housing.
No, this is the section that relates to height, 5.5.
Housing is not an allowed use in that district right now.
But this, the language with respect to chimneys and cupolas, if you look at the height definition, it applies to all zoning districts. So this is going in 5.5.
Okay, yeah.
So I
That makes
think
sense.
5.5 would then have to reference housing
Limited commercial.
versus commercial. We have 2 different requirements then, because we can't say housing can be 55 feet.
What I've proposed at the end of the first sentence is adding that clause that says, except commercial structures may be erected at a 55-foot height. That follows the height limitation on residential structures.
Mr. Chairman, if I may.
Yes, go ahead, Sarah.
So I think let's
That's fine.
focus on whether we have agreement on the intent of this. And then we clearly need to get a final article written, as well as knowing exactly how it fits into the bylaw. And I think that's going to be hard to do in this meeting tonight, but as long as we know where we're headed, then we can work it in. Does that make sense as a strategy? So that can we get agreement that 50 commercial uses can have height of 55 feet with additional height for the things listed? And the whole thing is by special permit, at least in terms of an intent. Does that make sense?
Yeah, any objection from the board on the 55-foot height extension for commercial?
That makes sense to me. I would like to know if there's any properties or acreage up there that, is on a hill, or so you'd have, a 20-foot hill, and then you'd have a 55-foot building. Like, are we assuming flat land, or are we taking variances into consideration?
I think we have defined elsewhere where what is the base elevation for any of the same question applies for a house, right? And I think that is in our definitions, but we should double check that. Just for reference, I did find out that if anybody's been to the New England Biolabs facility in Ipswich, that is just about 50 feet. Just if you're kind of wondering what it looks like on the ground, that's a relevant comparison. Like I said, I think the high school is about just over 55 feet.
Was that a LEED certified building? Do you know?
The New England Biolabs or the high school?
Yeah, the biolabs. 'Cause I thought the applicant has a LEED certified building in one of their facilities. I don't know.
Yeah, the applicant does have a LEED certified building and in Beverly, and New England Biolabs. I wasn't involved, but I do believe it was LEED
Gold.
certified.
Okay, so the next point is deleting is the minimum width requirement, which largely makes the LCD almost unbuildable in its current form. So from my
Minimum
perspective,
width of what, Sarah?
deleting the whole concept of minimum width.
Of the lot, Laura. Lot width.
The lot, thank you,
Lot width.
Sue.
Yeah.
Okay,
Sorry.
thank you.
I'm sorry. Minimum width of what? Sorry. And then increasing lot coverage and maximum lot impervious surface. Again, don't forget, these are all by special permit. So that's D. Can everybody see? I'm just trying to get through the.
Yep, understood.
Yeah. And then the next one is setback requirements reduced by 80%. And I think that there's, I've heard, and as well as this one, F, E and F. I personally sounds like we would like to think about these more as performance standards, because we might, to Gary's point, setbacks and screening might be performance based.
Yes,
Yeah.
that makes sense to me.
Yeah, and so I
Okay.
would think with E, if we have in the bylaw saying it may be 80%, it would be hard to,
Go less than that.
yes, because any applicant will say that by right, they have that 80%.
I agree. Similar, I do like, I mean, I think that people have valued the wooded buffer along 128 for many years. And that was the genesis of F, I suspect. And I think there's other ways to achieve that, as Laura suggested. But
Yeah,
maybe
I
we can
had
work.
some misgivings about just eliminating the 200-foot buffer, because that is what it is doing right now, is providing a wooded edge. So when you come up that corridor as an entry to Manchester, you enter sort of through this corridor of woods. But we could treat it as a performance standard with, visual screening, so long as it's not built visual screening.
Mhm. So, those were the changes. Are there any other changes, Gary, that we did not discuss? Or let's just start with Gary, because I know he's thought about this.
The definition we're going to be putting in our documents anyhow, so it doesn't need to be part of Mark's Glovsky's efforts.
Right.
We're going to have a great definition. I think Laura's working up or already worked up. I would just say I don't like percentages. I'd rather just see hard numbers or target numbers if there's a performance standard involved. So maybe maybe Mark Glovsky and his team could come up with some suggestions based on comments from tonight's meeting.
Yeah, I think we can work with them. So Ron, just I think I'm hearing that we've got a direction here that we're largely on the right path, and that we need to just change this to performance standard, add some language potentially about biohazard levels once we better understand what those mean, and that we carefully look at special permit language that addresses rooftop equipment, which is generally what it's called, and that we limit that to the commercial uses in this district. Those are things that I heard. Anything else that we should be taking into account?
I have a question about the biohazards. Maybe Peter Goudreau knows about it. Is there a state agency like the Board of Health or some state agency that regulates them regardless of what we say or do?
I'm sure there are, and I'm happy to get more information for you. I don't know the details there. I did learn that they are a biohazard safety level 2 organization. So there do appear to be, some concrete guidelines as to how you get defined.
Yeah. Mr. Chairman, I think Sarah Melish has her.
Sarah Melish.
Thank you. I would question whether you're intending to limit this to the east side of School Street. If not, have you taken into consideration the impact with respect to the SLV project on the west side of School Street?
They're different land uses completely, and I don't see how there would be any relevance.
I think there's a lot of relevance in terms of height and
well, everything that we're saying in the
One's
bylaw
housing.
change is for commercial use. So it's not
But
relevant.
SLV is a commercial use. It's a business, right?
Housing, isn't it?
I don't know how housing's classified.
I think it's a residential use.
But SLB is asking for a waiver of the use. And if they waive the use, does that then give them the right for the additional height restrictions and all the additional waivers you're giving with regards to frontage?
Sue
That's my
Brown, do you have
question.
a comment? Sue Brown, do you have a comment on that?
Well, I was just noting that the language regarding the height is specific to commercial, which I think is the right thing to do. On the setbacks, I think that you could do the same. I don't think, but residential is not allowed up there by right. So the only way it gets up there is by a special permit or by a 40B. But Sarah's right in that if there are regulations that now, it might minimize the amount of waivers that might be needed for that, but it doesn't affect whether they can or not. It just changes the number of waivers that they will be asking for.
It does seem like
it won't impact this project because it's after the fact, but if this is not successful and it goes forward, then it would change. They are bound by the zoning now.
It did occur to me that if we put this forward in a public hearing, in a public meeting, how does that affect the zoning board's review of SLV?
That would be.
Well, they're bound by the zoning that that is in place now. That would be my
Well,
opinion.
But
this
if we put a
Sarah,
Go ahead, Sarah.
they've asked for waivers from existing zoning. So if the zoning is more lenient before we're at the end of the permit process, they don't need as many waivers, is my understanding. And the question is do we want to limit this to the west side of School Street so we're not impacting the project on the east side of school? No, sorry, limit this to the east side of School Street so we're not impacting the project on the west side of School Street.
So without being prejudicial to SLV, it seems like the public has said that large scale construction on the west side of School Street is objectionable for views and topography and disruption to the site. So perhaps it would make sense to make this change to just the east side of School Street. I also think that while it is currently limited to the west of Pine Street, that is certainly significantly closer to our watershed, water supply. So if you think about the LCD as having, three main developable parts, one is west of Pine Street, one is the Shingle Hill parcel, and the other is the land at the end of Atwater Ave. So the land east of School Street. Well, I think everybody's mind is thinking the best place for commercial development of this is east of School Street.
I wouldn't object to changing the language.
Yeah, I would agree with what Sarah just said, both Sarahs, that we should probably limit to that one side because this still then also encompasses the west of Pine Street. So now we're increasing the height limit over there and the setbacks and everything else. So we have to be cognizant of we're doing this for all of the limited commercial district. And I don't know that that's the best scenario.
I would ask that we get legal advice on this because this may be edging towards spot zoning, and maybe it will bolster the state's approval process for SLV if it looks like we're punishing them. I don't know. I think we have to be careful what we do here, and we don't have to take a vote on that right now anyway. But I think it'd be a good idea to get some legal advice before going forward.
Well, Mary raised a point earlier about, topography, and I wonder if we have any provision in here against steep slopes development. And possibly that could also help to govern where we want to see development, as in not on steep slopes for reasons of erosion and water quality and view sheds.
Okay.
I agree, Laura, and to reduce blasting, I would think.
Yes, that too.
I think that much of the land run west of or east of Pine Street also has very steep slopes, challenging topography. So I think we just need to be careful not to build too tight a box if we really want to be flexible and allow the special permitting process to determine what is the appropriate site and site design.
Right. Yeah, I mean, steep slopes tend to be more environmentally sensitive places anyhow, for many reasons. So I can't tell by looking just at the zoning map because you can't see the topography, but I wonder if some analysis around that would be useful.
So can I make a suggestion that we take this feedback back and come? We're planning to have a meeting on Monday night on zoning changes. I feel like we've gotten some really good feedback here that we can work in and into the review. Also on the steep slopes question, the section 12 administration has language about special permits, and that might be the best place to put that, which would have benefit across the town, not just this area. So I think Gary and I have enough to go back to, and I think the important thing is that we're generally in agreement with the intent. But the details matter. And I'm not sure we can do them here before it's now also 7:10.
Yeah, I think you got a good direction from the board, and I think we have consensus on going forward. So
Great.
let's put it off. Let's come back on Monday. If we need legal advice, we'll try to get that in time also.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Okay, running a little behind. Okay, at this time, I'd like to open the continued public hearing on the special permit application for a site plan approval for the Cornerstone Church. The public hearing notice had been duly noted and advertised in the Cricket as follows. In accordance with Mass General Laws, Chapter 48, Section 11, the Manchester by the Sea Planning Board will hold a public hearing on September 27th, 2021 at 7 p.m. virtually via Zoom to consider the application of Cornerstone Church for a site plan approval with special permits under Section 7.5 and 6.9 of the zoning bylaw. As greater than 10 parking stalls are proposed at 189, 191, and 193 School Street, Assessors Map 38, lots 25, 15, and zoning district A. Under Section 7.8 of the zoning bylaw, the revised applications were received on Wednesday by the board on Wednesday, January 19th to members. A copy of the revised plans were sent to the DPW, police chief, and fire chief. At this time, we had received only a reply from the police chief, who has deferred to the DPW. A reminder that this church application is protected by the Dover Amendment. At this time, I would like to ask the applicant, Alden Drake, for comments and information on what's changed. Alden, are you with us? You're muted.
Unmute. All right, is that better?
Yes.
First of all, Happy New Year, everybody, and thank you for having us appear before you again this evening. Since the last meeting in early November, the plans have changed significantly. I'm going to have Carlton Quinn, who's the project engineer, summarize them, and I'll supplement his comments as I think if it's needed. But basically, there are now 2 entrances. Many other changes have been made to pedestrian, to driveway circulation, to parking, to grading at the back for the open air shade shelter, landscaping enhancements, a stone wall replicating the stone wall down at the Essex County Club, a little down School Street, and a reconfiguration of sidewalks in the interest of safety and circulation. So I'll let Carlton make his presentation, and I have notes to supplement if it's necessary. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Carlton Quinn. I'm a civil engineer with Allen Major Associates. I'm going to see if I can share my screen here. Can everyone see that plan?
Yes, Carlton.
All right, thank you. So the scope of the project has remained basically the same. We've got about a 9,800 square foot church building. The previous version had a accessory building over here, approximately 4,000 square feet. We have revised it to be about a 1,000 square foot open air structure with a flat lawn area around it, and it's connected to the building with a standard sidewalk. There's no ADA ramps proposed anywhere on the site anymore. There were a couple we had at the first version that we showed you. The parking has changed pretty dramatically. Well, it's the same amount of parking spaces and a similar proposal to before, but we made it a little more efficient. We had originally had the driveway coming into the front here. We took some feedback from the board and looked at the pedestrian issues with coming in the front here, and we've moved it to the back drive aisle here. So the driveway now comes in straighter, comes into the back, and there's complete two-way circulation around the parking lot. We've added this striped walkway protected by landscape islands down the middle of the parking lot. And these are going to be raised sidewalks, so it'll go up about 3 to 6 inches and have arrows showing that there's a pedestrian crossing right through the middle of the parking lot. We still have the pervious pavement parking lot here. We have overflowed grass parking in the back here. The ratio is still, I believe, 64 parking stalls on the pervious pavement, and then 34 overflow parking stalls in the grassed area. We've made some revisions to the parking layout. We have some tandem stalls. We really wanted to squeeze down this footprint as much as we could without losing any parking stalls. Even though we have the same amount of parking stalls, we have changed this slope from a 1-to-1 riprap slope to a 2-to-1 landscape slope. And we have still been able to reduce the amount of disturbance in this area by about 10,000 square feet. The original slope went from the parking level up to about elevation 73. The current slope goes from the same elevation up to about elevation 65. So we flattened the slope, landscaped it, and brought it down about 8 feet from where the previous slope went up to, which I know was an issue with some of the board members. Moving to the front of the building, we previously had a ring road coming around the whole building here. Looking at pedestrian and vehicular access again, and safety and bike access. We added an additional curb cut here to the town side of School Street. So we're now going to come, it's the same basement entrance here. We come around to the second floor, have a more formal entrance here. This is going to be grass pavers. Anything you see green is going to be vegetated. This is going to be kind of a patio style drop-off area with concrete sidewalks flush to the entrance. There's no steps, no ramps, no switchback ramps in the front. So you're able to walk in straight up there. Some more grass landscaping, and then we'll have a standard asphalt driveway right at the beginning here. This does a lot of things to the access, especially pedestrian and bike access. So now when you're coming from the village down here, walking in, you can come right into the sanctuary without having to cross the driveway, the parking lot, any sort of vehicular access. This down here is a kind of a rain garden. It's all kind of low-lying shrubs, some mild depressions, a bioretention area that the sidewalk kind of serpentines through, pollinating plants, and just kind of a nice change in slope here that's all landscaped and ADA accessible, and you can obviously ride a bike down here. We've provided some bike parking right here, some benches under the shade trees, and we've obviously added a lot of landscaping. Per the zoning, we were required to have, I believe, 19 trees in and around the parking area. Currently, we have proposed 39 trees, so almost double what's required to try to add some additional, shade trees and then reduce the heat issue with the parking lot. And you can see this kind of odd layout here. This is to kind of frame the parking back here. That's why those are kind of laid out like that. At the front of the site, Alden has committed to redoing the sidewalk. We're proposing a new asphalt sidewalk here with a stone kind of aesthetic wall here, which I have a picture of. I believe he took a picture down. It was the Essex Club, and this is the style of stone wall they're looking to propose along the whole frontage of the sidewalk that they're putting in. A nice kind of old farmy looking wall. And I think beyond that, that is about most of the comments we had here. I know there's always been some sightline issues, questions along Mill Street. Just to go over that once again, I believe the traffic engineer spoke to the board at the last hearing and showed by ways of a sightline assessment in his traffic report that there is minimum sightlines in all movements coming in Mill Street, out Mill Street, out of the driveway, into the driveway. And in addition to that, Alden has coordinated with the town. They actually trim back all the deciduous brush on this side of Mill Street. So the sight lines out there currently are much greater than you had seen previously on your site walk due to some vista pruning or trimming or whatever the town highway department did over here on Mill Street. What else do I have? We've also proposed 2 EV charging stations as part of the parking over here in this corner.
Carlson, just a, thank you for the explanation. Just a clarifying question, that lighter green patch in the upper, within the wooded zone, can you talk about what that grading is and generally speaking, what the drainage is doing on site, across the site?
Certainly. So all the water that's getting caught in the pervious pavement will go through the pavement, the sand, it'll be cleaned per the standard pavement design. And then it'll go into a reservoir underneath this. Since the last revision, we've put in some like emergency overflow. So we've put in some catch basins on the site. And that is just in case for some reason something was clogged. The catch basin will catch the water and get it into that reservoir underneath. There's no outfalls, there's no discharges. It's all going to be collected and infiltrated into the ground. The site naturally flows this way. It does in the existing conditions, and it still does in the proposed conditions, matches the same kind of direction that the water flowed in the existing conditions. So at this point, it's kind of the end of our development before it goes over. So we put a catch basin here to catch any sort of overflow that will come in, you know, extreme storms and whatnot. And there's a natural depression here. I don't know if you remember when you were out there, there's kind of a 10-foot deep depression here. We just put a small berm in, and this water, any emergency water that's going to be collected is going to discharge into hit this depression here and just naturally infiltrate. So this was kind of a emergency overflow to catch water and just discharges down here into this depression. So it's just maybe a 2-foot berm we built here, just to hold back some water in this area over here. Does that answer your question?
It does, thank you.
Yes.
No problem.
Okay.
So I think in addition to that, I know Alden has heard a few times that you're looking to build this for the next 100 years. And he just wanted to know that the church is committed to doing as much as they can. And you know, they don't have the money to build this yet, yet alone make commitments for additional stuff above and beyond the church. But they're going to take a look at certainly putting solar panels on the south side of this roof and looking at putting in electric heat pumps to hopefully make the building fossil fuel free and hopefully power the heat pumps with the solar panels. Again, he's very passionate about this. He has it on his own house and he can certainly speak to it more intelligently than I can, but he wanted me to let you know that they are certainly looking to the future on this project. And I also had in the previous versions, we've kind of cut the site plan off here. I had them extend the viewport here, just so you know that this whole area here is basically untouched. So you have almost a third of the site that's not going to be untouched and is going to remain that existing vegetated hill back here. And you can see it's a big area, minus this little drainage swale that we have over here. But that's all I have. Alden, I don't know if you wanted to add anything else.
I'm sure it'll come up in the discussion, but part of the appeal of having a second driveway point of access is that neither School Street alone nor Mill Street alone is really perfect. So we felt by adding a second point of access, you know, people can pick their point of access that best suits them. It's also important to note that at present we have about 60 cars coming on a typical Sunday, and 45 of those 60 cars come down School Street from the highway ramp. The other 15 cars come from within the village. So if we were at our new site now, there'd be a net reduction of 45 vehicle trips down School Street and 45 leaving School Street every week. So there's really going to be a net reduction in a net reduction in vehicle trips up and down School Street through the village. We also really are very pleased and excited about the new configuration, having the sidewalk off of School Street not have to cross a driveway. And then by not having a driveway down the south side of the sanctuary building, we don't have to worry about a pedestrian crossing on that, at the foot of that driveway. And then another reason to not have a driveway down the side of the building, we want to be as little of a burden on our abutters as possible. And their house, I don't know if you can see it on this plan or if you've noticed it on other plans, Mr. and Mrs. Parkhurst's house is very close to the property line, and then they have a garage in the back that's very close to the property line. And so we just don't feel, we feel good that we're not going to be driving vehicles along their sideline. And then just to reemphasize what Carlton said about the tree, you know, we're meeting the 19 required trees either in the parking area or within 5 feet of the parking area, but we're adding an additional 20 trees. So that was one of the nice recommendations that we got out of that, the notes and comments that we felt was really positive. I think that's it for now. But we're certainly.
Hey, all right, thank you, Mr. Drake. I think I'll go around the board first for comments and then open it up to the public. So I'll start in reverse order. I'll start with Laura, Ms. Tenney. Comments?
Thanks, Ron. Thank you, Alden and Carlton, for the presentation. I just want to say off the bat, I'm really pleased at how much the plan has changed, I think, for the better. And for myself, I'll say I'm really appreciate how much listening you all did. I think environmentally, in terms of the disturbance, this is much better. It's a smaller footprint, disturbs less of the woodland. The grading is much reduced, so that's all terrific. And I think the vehicular and pedestrian circulation is much safer, much improved. While I still would prefer not to see the road, turn in front of the church, to have that separate driveway, I think it's vastly better than having the ring road around the church before. So my accommodations for that. I had a few questions based on the plan. Carlton, you had said that the walk that goes up to the front door, there are no steps or other obstructions to someone needing accessible route to the door. Is that true? So that's a sloped walk in terms of the grade, and there are no steps that you need to pass by. I couldn't tell from the grading plan. It wasn't given.
That's correct. There is some slope to it, but it's under the 4.5%. You typically see the sidewalk, and there is no steps. It's a flush walk-in in both doors here at the School Street side,
okay,
and both the other sides too, actually.
Great. And it looks like you do have bicycle parking, although it's not noted on the plan. I believe I see it on the parking lot side.
This is the bicycle parking here at the back.
Okay.
I don't think it may not have made it onto the plans, but it should.
Yeah, I think
maybe it's just on the landscaping plans. It is
it's on the
there, though,
landscaping plan. It's just not noted, but I do see that. So that's great to know that. And I appreciate the EV chargers too. I think that's really the right direction to be going in. In terms of the pervious pavers, it's wonderful you're doing so much with pervious pavers. I am wondering about the grass pave at the front. In my experience, the grass pave, so the areas that you're showing in green, is suitable for fire lanes and overflow parking, but it doesn't stand up to frequent use or uses on slopes or turning movements when there's anything beyond very occasional use. So I wondered if you had considered perhaps just going with pervious pavers there rather than the grass pave. As much as you like to see it vegetated, I'm just not sure it's going to hold up.
Yeah, I think our preference would probably be the pervious pavement. It just seemed like there was a lot of emotion behind getting it more grass in the front. We would certainly prefer just to do a standard pervious pavement in those areas if that's the board's wish.
Yeah, and if you're trying to do it ceremonial, I mean, you could use pervious unit pavers. It doesn't have to be asphalt up there. There's different ways that you could do it, I think, to lessen the kind of asphalt drive look of it and still have it be more ceremonial. But I do think that the grass pave is probably not going to provide the performance that you were hoping to do.
Yeah, and I think that was the thought of this area here would be a unipave type block system.
Yeah.
So to extend it just a little bit further would not be a big issue.
Yeah. The sloped areas that you show around the side of the site and in the back, so much better, much safer than how they were shown before with the one-to-one rip wrap. I was really quite concerned about the safety of those. I think this is an improvement. There are a couple of places in the grading where if you could make the, landforms a little more naturalistic, not quite so many straight lines, and kind of the geometry behind the picnic shed, the geometry of the berm, I sort of question why the straight line, grading back there, but I see that you're trying to keep a little bit of a lawn behind the picnic shed, but in your grading plan, it looks a little bit kind of hard edged. I did wonder, this is just a detail of the long-term maintenance. You're showing all of that area with the steeper slopes as wildflower plantings. And if you would consider putting woody species there, small trees, small shrubs, nothing that's expensive or bald and burlapped, because you can't put that on a slope. But I think long-term, you can't really mow those slopes, so they're going to be difficult to maintain at that steepness, and it might just settle into the surrounding a little bit better if you consider some native woodies. And then I think the last comment. Yeah, sorry, go ahead if you wanted to respond to that.
Yeah, I think the thought there is not to mow that, to make it become naturalized after it's.
Okay. Okay. The addition of all the 39 trees and the more naturalistic rain garden, so forth, is a huge improvement. You had mentioned before site lighting, and I wondered if you'd thought about that, or if you would be including a site lighting plan going forward.
I'll defer to Alden. I know the building will be lit. Were you thinking of any additional site lighting?
Well, we really haven't gotten to that level of detail. I mean, obviously there'd be some site lighting for the parking lot and the sidewalk at the rear of the building.
Mm-hmm.
We're not a church that has a choir, so we're not bringing 40 people to the church at night on Thursday nights for choir practice. We do have a Sunday early evening youth group. So there would naturally be some lighting in the open air shade shelter, because at certain times of the year, obviously it's dark sooner and we'd need some lighting there. Obviously with shields so that the abutters are not in any way inconvenienced or bothered by the lighting. But we have not specifically designed that. We would also, of course, just want some lighting at the front, because even though weddings and funerals tend to be, and church worship services are day events, we might have occasion where we would want lighting at the front of the building.
Yeah, just a consideration for the example, the pedestrian route up to the building. You might want some lighting on that just for safety.
Yeah, once we're beyond the planning board's review of the special permit and site plan approval, the church will make a decision about hiring an architect and how aggressively to proceed with the design and fundraising. Clearly, a project architect will advise us on not just interior, but exterior lighting, sidewalk lighting, things of that nature. It just really isn't reflected on this site plan.
Right.
I think if the board wanted to put in standard conditions for site lighting, such as, dark sky compliant and no lumens past the property line, and we could certainly have an administrative approval of that or something.
Okay.
Yeah, we're keenly sensitive to the fact that we have a few residential neighbors. They're a single family, they're owner occupied, they've been good neighbors to us. We've been good neighbors to them, and we don't want to cause anything to make that change.
Right. And the last question is on the traffic patterns, and it certainly, looks better to me. I'm not a traffic engineer. Will your traffic engineer be providing an updated analysis of your new 2-entry in terms of sight lines and just assuring that everything is safe? It certainly looks like an improvement, but just wanted to do that due diligence.
Well, we kind of did an in-house traffic analysis, because there are vehicles would approach this site from 4 directions. They'd approach from the south, which is the village. They'd approach from the north, coming over the the highway overpass. Those are folks from Essex and Gloucester. There'd be approach from the east, which is the far end of Mill Street, and there'd be approach off the highway ramp, which is sort of off the west. And we did we had long conversation, and we did some modeling in our team meetings. Obviously, people coming from the village are going to be very happy coming in off of School Street. Obviously, people coming from the far end of Mill Street are going to be very happy coming right in the back of Mill Street. People coming over the highway overpass, like from Essex, they can choose whichever way they prefer. My family and I come off the highway, and I would, I've probably driven onto this site more than anybody in the past 2 years. I probably made 100 car trips to this site, and
I guess I was just asking if if the civil engineer had,
no,
validated the layout, or okay, it's beyond a kind of anecdotal. I'm agreeing with you. It looks like it's better performing, but I just wanted to ask that question.
I think it optimizes and it's very efficient.
Ron, I should turn over my time. Thank you very much. I'll wave to the next person.
Thank you, Laura. Chris Olney. I don't know if there's anything left to ask, but go ahead.
So I guess I have a general comment and then a specific one. Generally, I think this is, as Laura said, a vast improvement. I'm wondering if now you're going to go design the building, and the building is going to have to comply with the site approval. And I'm hoping that's not necessarily the case, that if the architect says, it's better to have one entrance in a different location, that I just hope that you'll come back to us and say, we want to make these adjustments. I think the way this is designed kind of dictates what a building might look like, but I'm not an architect, so I don't know. And maybe the architect will have a whole different idea of what should happen here. That's my general comment. The specific thing, I'm worried about the School Street access, because I can see a problem with somebody coming out and then trying to turn towards Manchester, or somebody coming in while somebody's coming out. I can see some problems at that entranceway, and I'm wondering if it might make sense to make it one way so that people come in there and there's no traffic problems, and then they go out through Mill Street. I don't know.
We did think about that. We had a long conversation about whether it should be one way, whether one of the entrances should be one way and the other one two way, or both one way or both two way. And we concluded that we really want two way on both sides. And, most of the traffic that would come into this is all going the same direction. So before the worship service, before the prayer time, and before Sunday school, cars would generally be arriving. And then in the hour or so after the end of the worship service, cars would generally be leaving. And again, as I said, there's four vehicle groups, and neither access, whether it's entering or leaving, neither access meets the needs of all four vehicle groups. So that's why we wanted two-way, two access points.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Right. Thank you, Chris. Mr. Gilbert, any comments or questions?
I think this is a vast improvement from the ring road around the church. What they've done is more or less, roughly speaking, cut the congestion on Mill Street in half.
Yeah.
People, more or less, a lot of people can enter from School Street, and roughly half of them will be leaving from Mill if they, the way I see it working is they'll probably enter at school and tend to exit at Mill. I'd like to see I'd like to see a couple of road signs added to Mill Street, letting people know, the neighbors are going to know, but let people in general know that they're approaching a church entrance or exit. I don't think that's, I think it would be effective and good to ask for. I also think it's really great how you listened to us before and you put a pedestrian crossing laterally across the parking area so people can safely get from the overflow parking area or places within the lot and get to the building without being vulnerable to being hit by cars. That wasn't there before. I still, I'll say my little speech I've said before to whoever may be listening and hasn't heard it. I still think you're really convinced on having a ceremonial driveway in front of your building, and none of our churches in town have that. I think it's antithetical to the way our town's developed. It's a more suburban approach to development of this site. And that's one thing I don't want to see still. I like the School Street entry a lot, but I'd rather the road go down straight to the parking lot. You could screen it from the neighbor. I think the whole sequence that our town has is sidewalk, a walkway, and directly into a church. And in terms of the look and feel of our town and urban form, that's what we have, is what makes us a village, partially. It's probably more you're gonna suffer from this if it's not worked out well, but this whole idea of catch basins and drainage, I don't know if the lot floods, and I don't know how much of a subsurface retention area you're planning on calculating. Maybe Laura might comment whether we need to review that. Again, if there's a problem, it ends up being your problem, but it's also a problem for the users. It's, like if you park in a shopping center and the slope is too steep, your doors in your car slam shut, and the planning board should not allow people to have steeply sloped parking areas. Similarly, we should scrutinize if some of that lot will end up being flooded. I don't know that. Maybe Laura might have a comment on it. And I support the idea of performance standards for lighting that was mentioned. Sounds like you're amenable to that. I think that's important for the neighbor, because you're going to have parking lot lighting and other lighting. And that's pretty easy, I think, to deal with through performance standards. And pervious pavers, I would support that rather than the grasscrete notion, for exactly what Laura said, that over time they don't really work. And I'll just remind you again about the way this is going to work. I think to me, it seems obvious. There's going to be a certain amount of people who are going to stop on School Street, even with what you've got, and drop people off. And they're going to go around and park, or they'll go elsewhere and come back later. So again, this ceremonial road you have in front of it is, well, I don't think it's needed, but I know it's your project and you want to build it. So those are basically my points, and I like a lot of the improvements. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Gilbert. Ms. Foley?
I think it looks really good. Appreciate that you took so many of the comments to heart and tried to adapt them into your design. And I think any of my questions were already covered. So I think it looks good. Thanks.
Thank you, Mary. And Ms. Creighton?
I'm not going to repeat everybody else's comments. I think it's been well said, except a couple of things. One is, when you're leaving the parking lot, I think you're unlikely to go up and around in front of the building. You're going to just scoot out Mill Street. I think that's going to be the predominant exit from the parking lot. It's hard to tell, right, how people will use it. And I remain concerned about the visibility as you exit that Mill Street road driveway, and turn left towards School Street, and somebody is zooming down the hill, the Mill Street Hill. I think that's our most dangerous point. People zoom down there, and it's a short, and the people coming out of the driveway here are going to be getting up to speed. So I'm wondering if there is as horrible as it sounds, sort of something that could be triggered by people exiting. That's like a flashing, just a small light with just a small yellow flasher that is triggered by a magnetic switch as people go up that driveway on the exit, on the outbound side. and that that small light was on Mill Street, because I think that's going to be our most dangerous place. And then to Gary's comment, I think that the topography out there is pretty clearly slopes away from the parking toward the and down the hill. So I'm less worried about the flooding condition, even in a big rain. I had one other thing, but by and large, I thought it was a good set of additions. So thank you. Oh, lastly, I know what I was gonna say is, once people get themselves exiting the church and heading on Mill Street towards school, they are effectively, nothing we can do about it. It's kind of the same problem as exiting the School Street driveway, perhaps worse. If somebody is exiting Mill Street and turning left, I think the sight distances there may be as bad or worse than if they were to exit the School Street driveway here and turn left. So, so I don't think that exiting on this at the School Street driveway is making a challenging condition worse. And, you know, I'm not aware that it's a hugely problematic intersection for accidents, but I might be worth asking the police chief. I'm not sure what we do about it anyway. So my big question would be, could we put a small flasher that is triggered by a magnetic switch on that Mill Street exit for the left-hand turn?
Thank you, Sarah. And just in the difference to time, I do like the design. I think it's a great improvement. I echo everyone else's comments. I agree with Laura on the pervious pavers in front. I like the idea of signs that Gary suggested. And I also think you should maybe consider the one-way. Might be, I don't see many people coming up and exiting that way. I think it might be more convenient to just go down that way, but that would, I think you should take a look at that. I have asked the DPW, fire chief and police chief to weigh in on this. I haven't gotten comments back, but then again, our DPW is a registered engineer, so I would also ask him to maybe comment on the drainage. I know there's some concerns on that, on capacity, so hopefully he can maybe comment on that. So those
if
are
I could just comment on that.
Yes.
This is also in front of the Conservation Commission, and I know that they were pretty focused on stormwater and getting comments back from the DPW for their review of the notice of intent. And I don't know if there's a line in the town whether the Concom typically takes jurisdiction of the planning board, but I just wanted you to know that the Concom is also looking at the stormwater very thoroughly.
Okay, thank you, Carlton. Okay, so at this point, I will open this up for any public comment or questions.
Ron,
Please
Sue
try to.
Brown can we allow Sue to talk before we?
Oh, I'm sorry, Sue Brown. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, no worries. I just wanted to confirm that late Friday, I did hear from the police department or the fire chief, and he said as long as the roads met the standards, that he didn't see any problem with those. So that was
Okay,
from the
so
fire
then-
chief, and I'll put that in our box, in your file. It's just a
Okay,
brief
thank
comment.
you.
You're welcome.
All right, Sarah Mellish, is that a hand from a previous topic or is it a fresh hand?
It's a fresh hand.
All right, you have a fresh hand raised. Let's hear some comments.
So for 12 years, I owned 187 and 185 School Street, which abuts the site. The house on 187 School Street dates back to 1684, had five fireplaces, 4 beehive ovens. And it used to have a grist mill where 128 is now located. I am and behind the houses was strictly forests, trees and uplands. And I'm concerned about the adverse impact on the historic structure with that open structure of 1,000 square feet. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. Sandy, could you identify yourself?
Great, thank you. Sandy Rogers, 82 Old Essex Road. I guess this is just a comment for the board to really be looking at the traffic flow more closely concerning the School Street entrance. If I don't know if there's a diagram that shows all of School Street, and the exit ramp going north is almost directly across the street from this location. And there are a lot of people that go fast on School Street heading into town. And if someone is turning left there, they could be potentially blocking the entrance from that exit ramp. And also concerning sort of backups and things turning left. So even if you end up keeping that School Street entrance, you might only want to make it right turn only from in town. Anyone turning left in there, that might cause a huge issue and something that a traffic study would need to be done around. So that's one major concern. And the other is just echoing everyone about keeping the whole sort of visual and flow around the church fitting for our town and the way that that village feel would look. But it's more about that safety. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Rogers. Any other comments from the public? Okay, I would like to continue the public hearing on this to February 14th to get comments back from the DPW and the Concom. I'm wondering, Mr. Drake, if that would be amenable?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so our next meeting is February 14th. If you could send a letter to town clerk and copy the planning board clerk, Sharon George, we will vote to continue the public meeting to February 14th with hopefully comments back from DPW, Concom, and Board of Selectmen even.
Mr. Chair, would that be 7 p.m. again?
I will make it for 7 p.m. That's correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Do you don't
Also,
plan on
like-
making any, do you plan on making any additional changes within the 2 weeks
I don't
after hearing
believe so,
this?
Carl.
Okay.
Ron, could I ask a question?
Yes, Laura?
Thank you. Given the questions that have come up about the School Street entry, I wonder if it would be helpful to have the project traffic engineer back at the next hearing. And if any further analysis is needed of the School Street entry, whether it should be, right turn only or one way, or just so that we have some data to back up what looks like anecdotally is a better plan, but and whether DPW's review of it will be sufficient.
Okay, Mr. Drake, is that a possibility, or maybe a written statement, or what?
Well,
would
without,
be,
the traffic engineer made it very clear that without doing a full data analysis and collection and research, he can't offer opinions. I'll just tell you, it cost us $2,600 for the work we did so far. And honestly, I don't know how much is benefited or gained. Having frontage on 2 streets, having driveway access on 2 streets. I think Mr. Gilbert's comment was very insightful, that it splits the potential volume or congestion. And also just remember, we're a church. We're not there, 5 days a week. We're not conducting a business. Nobody's living on the property. So traffic is very limited, and that was already covered in the traffic consultant's report. and he said one of his conclusions was that there'd be a net reduction in the total traffic coming in and off that site. And don't forget, we're already in the village. We're already at 20 School Street, and 60 cars every Sunday travel in the village and go up and down School Street. So I think the volume of cars really does not warrant spending another.
I wonder if this could be addressed by zooming out in that diagram. Your site plan doesn't currently show the alignment relative to 128. Maybe if you just pull back and provide us a kind of circulation diagram, including the ramp to 128, and then that might give our DPW director and other public safety officials just some more context.
Carl has to that right now, but
Or overlay it on a Zoom, on a Google map, or
Yeah, something like that that just kind of pulls out so we can see the relative alignments of one to another.
Sorry, I'm breaking up. Are you asking me a question?
is it possible to show the 128 exit and exit configuration in the same site plan view as the entrances to on Mill and off of School Street in the same, so we can kind of see the alignment of where the exits are?
Our survey didn't go across the street, so we don't have a field survey of the alignment. Could I take an aerial and drop the site plan on it? I could do something like that. That wouldn't be a problem.
And would the board be happy if I had one of the DPW, either Chuck or Nate, at our next meeting to maybe you can ask questions to? Would that be satisfactory?
Yeah,
I think
that
that'd be
seems like,
fine. Yeah.
that would be fine. That plus what Carlton's referring to, an aerial plan with the site plan dropped on it. Seems like it would help to
Okay.
provide some more context.
Yep, I think that would be helpful. I just pulled it up on Google Earth. And I think it does help to see it. So I don't know that we need to share it right now, but
Yeah,
we
and I
can
mean,
just push that to the
there's
next
no great answer to the traffic here because of the location of the site and the location of that ramp. It is what it is. There's going to be conflicts no matter where you put the driveway.
Mr. Chairman, if it might be useful to ask the police again if the Mill Street intersection, it's I'm looking at it right now. The Mill Street exit is directly across from one of the ramps as well. So it's kind of a similar, question there. And not that we can do anything about that, but it's a proxy, I guess is my point, for the entrance off School Street. So I think the Google Earth map would be helpful for us all to have in our packet. Maybe another conversation with the chief of police.
Okay, we'll do that. All right, well, I'd like to take a motion to continue the public hearing to February 14th. There's a
So
second.
moved.
Seconded.
Roll call vote, Ms. Creighton,
Yes.
Ms. Foley,
Yes.
Mr. Gilbert. Mr. Gilbert. Gary, you're on mute. I'll move on. Mr. Olney,
Yes.
Mr. Gary, you said yes, and Ms. Tenney,
Yes.
and the chair votes yes. Okay, we'll see you in 2 weeks.
very good. I'll get the letter out to the town clerk.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
Good night. Great job.
Thank you.
Okay, the next item, pretty short, just on the 40A update. This is the by right two-family housing within a half mile of the MBTA station. My reason for putting this on the agenda is for Sue to just inform the board what's due when and what the schedule is so we can kind of get this on our plate, with all the other stuff we have going on, but we need to not miss any deadlines. So Sue, any further update on what's going on with this, or is it still in flux?
Sure. So the draft guidelines promulgated by BHCD are on the website, and they are taking comments until May 2nd. What the town needs to do in order to advance this project is the Board of Selectmen has to host a public forum and present these regulations to the community. Then they need to attest that they've done so and fill in a brief community information form on the website and submit that by that May 2nd deadline. So it's the Board of Selectmen that needs to host a meeting and present the information. Once that is done, the next deadline is that the town needs to create an action plan, but we have until July 1, 2023. And we have until December 31, 2024 to get it passed. So we have a rather an appropriate timeline, I think, to do this work. And when we submit the community form, part of what the state wants to know is, do we want help with this? Do we have the capacity to do it ourselves? I would suggest that we take advantage of any technical help that we can get and move forward that way. But I think I've uploaded several documents at SharePoint. I'm happy to upload. There's a frequently asked questions document. There's the draft guidelines. There's a document that says what we need to do comply and has those deadlines. There's a forum that's listed. So all that is available. And I think we just need to dig into it and then gradually move forward. But those are the deadlines, and I'm happy to answer any questions about.
Yeah, okay, before I ask the board, I would think it would be a nice thing, Sue, if you could maybe prod Greg to put that information in one of his blogs that he writes, just so there's some schedule that the town knows. I think the town feels there's some urgency that this is going to happen overnight. So I think that schedule might be a good thing to kind of get out there.
Sounds wise. I'm sure he'll be happy to do so. And I did put him on notice today that they would need to host that presentation, and I'm sure he'll be asking for my help in presenting it. So we should get that out there sooner than May. So.
Okay, so I'm going to take some comments from the board on this briefly. So Gary, you had your hand up first. Go ahead, Mr. Gilbert.
A question for Sue. I think it would be really helpful to everybody who's trying to get their mind around this whole thing. If Sue could somehow educate us, what is the actual list of types of funding we would not be able to get if we sort of try to shun the effects of the 40A law, and of those types of funding, how much funds have we gotten in the last, say, 5 years or chunk of time from those funding sources? I think it needs to be made kind of real to people what's at stake here if they want to try to go the course of just shunning this whole 40A effort.
Sure. I think I'm happy to provide that information. It's the types of funding are actually on the documents that are provided. And I would say, I think it's an opportunity of us to look at our housing and use it as an opportunity to put housing where we want. I'm just doing a little research today, thinking about how big is 25 acres, how big is 50 acres, and you'd be surprised that it's not very large. And that for example, if you look at 1 and 3 School Street, which is a private apartment house right across from Town Hall, 92 units per acre. You don't need a lot of that to get the amount of housing that they're asking for. And I know people are saying 750 units, but if you really delve into the information, what it says is that we need a minimum capacity of 300 units. So, you know, we really need to look carefully at these regulations and understand what they're asking us to do. We have some density that we're very comfortable in town with. Not every parcel has to be 15 units per acre. You know, you can have, as long as there's 15 units per acre over the 50 acres, that's how you can do it. And you can, you know, think about it and put the housing where you want it, where it's best for us to create it. And I think move from that place. So just some thoughts. I've some amount of time thinking about it today. So.
Okay, Ms. Foley, you had your hand up.
Yes, thanks. To Gary's question, it falls under the three categories, which I'm sure you know. It's the Housing Choice Initiative, local capital projects, and MassWorks. And I've been going back and forth a bit with the town administrator to get some clear numbers on that, so residents can know the dollar amount, so that we can make a clear choice of if it's best to not do an overlay district versus foregoing some grant money. And I would like some clarification, because the calculation is based on number of current housing units times that 15% or 25%, depending if you have MBTA or transit or bus line. But so for communities that fall under that 750 threshold, which is the 50 acres times 15, they say it does become the minimum of 750 because you do that 50 acres times 15. So if we could get clarity on that, but I'm sure most of this will come out in the Board of Selectmen public forum, but I think it would be nice if residents felt they had a choice in this or knew the data before they make a choice. Thanks.
Thank you, Mary. And Laura Tenney.
Sue, I liked your idea of getting some professional help if the state is offering that and providing that. And if we could do some just sort of sample test fits or something that helps people to visualize the locations and density. Obviously, you know, it's not anything near a project, but I think all of this is rather abstract for people right now. So if we could show, as we did for the master planning study, some sort of scale models and some precedents and some kind of very high level test fits, I think that would be a good use of some support if it's offered.
Thank you, Laura. And Chris Holman.
So I think there's a misunderstanding here. The state is not mandating housing. The state is mandating a zone which would allow housing. And the 15 units per acre is, as Sue was pointing out, is well within what's happening in the downtown now. 12 Summer Street that whole complex is about 20 units per acre. So what the state is talking about is something less dense than what's already in our downtown. Powder House Lane is quite a bit less, more dense than 15 units per acre. So, you know, we have to take this with a grain of salt. And I think rather than trying to balance or weigh the advantages of state money versus all this state mandate, what we really should be doing is thinking of this as an opportunity to revitalize the businesses in the downtown, which have been struggling for the last couple of years. And as a lot of the commercial owners in downtown will tell you, the more people we can get living downtown, the better the businesses are going to do. And that's what we should be focusing on, not worrying about what the state is mandating. So I think we have a lot of talk about this in the future, but I think we need to think of this as an opportunity, if not as some kind of punishment. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. All right. Hopefully the selectmen will schedule this forum. I see Ann Harrison is on, so hope she can pass the word up. And any other further comments on this? We'll move on. So thank you, Sue. The next item is blasting regulations. Now, this has been ongoing. The town voted this last town meeting in April or May, was it? And we have yet to write something. So I'm going to keep this on the agenda until something comes up. Does anyone have any other comments on this? Okay. So I'll put that on for next week, next meeting. So with most of our business done, I would like to talk about the recodification. And at this point, I will turn the meeting over to our vice chair, Sarah Creighton, to update us and continue with the recodification efforts that we're under the gun to produce.
Okay. So we where we left off last time, unfortunately for anybody who's joining us today, we had a problem with our zoning meeting last time got cut short because of Zoom confusion. So that was unfortunate because that leaves us with more to do tonight, unfortunately. But let's get to it. Sorry. One of the things that we did last time that I didn't clarify what we were talking about is that I mentioned the parking lot, and that is a term for meetings that when we're talking about one thing and somebody brings up something that we don't want to forget, to make sure we come back to them. So Laura kept a list for us last time. Laura, if you don't mind doing the same this time, that would be great, and sent it to me. And here's the list, just so we realize that we didn't forget. And and we're not going to talk about most of these tonight, but I just want to let you know we still have it. It's how to present to the public. And we had an email question about that today from one of the members of the public. Cross-referencing definitions with a use table. I'll come back to that. Impervious service definition, dimensional tables, and whether select board or selectmen should be edited, and the dates for the public hearing. So some of those things we'll get to tonight, but I wanted to just assure you that that's the process that we're using so we don't forget things. We were working our way through sections 1 through 4. And one of the things that Mary sent us is she looked at the definitions that are not in the use table. And this is a list, a little badly formatted, sorry. And items in the use table that are not in the definitions. So I think this is not a problem because, I'm sorry, the fonts are different. That's not important. These definitions are throughout the zoning and not necessarily in the, just because they're not in the use table, they may be referenced elsewhere. So let's first take that, my assessment of that, and determine whether or not, or that I think some of them might be in future zoning. So I'm comfortable leaving these definitions in our section 2 definitions, even though they're not in the use table. Does anybody object to that? That makes sense. And I'll put.
I just had a question on a couple of them. Are we anticipating we're going to have a drive-through hotel, motel? I mean, I guess what's the anticipation? I mean, because we could put a lot of things in definitions that we don't have.
Right, that's true.
That's something I mentioned when we talked about it a year and a half ago or something. I mean, it's pretty beyond imagination that we would have one, as well as a funeral home, to be honest.
Home's a commercial use. So what I'm going to ask is that if people have specific ones they want to take out, that they email me them. I will send this list after the meeting, and we will in the final version we'll take them out. But Unless people want to take them out now, that either way is fine by me. Do we
Sarah,
have a
just to clarify, having the definition does not mean that we allow the use, correct?
fact? It just means they're in the definition table.
Okay, yeah, okay.
That's it. That's all it means. They were, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, somebody who predates me, I think Mark Bobrowski genned up some of this list of definitions. So they are things that are from a variety of places, as well as our bylaw.
That's correct. I think a lot of them are just potentially copied over from elsewhere.
Yeah. I mean, we have some of these things in the commercial district right now.
And I don't know if anyone did a check, but even if they're not in the use table, might they be somewhere else in the bylaw?
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. We
So
might.
a warehouse it may be somewhere else in the bylaw, but.
So I'm less worried
Well-
about this list, but then the next
guess
list. Oh, go ahead.
I guess the only thing I would say with that with warehouse is, because I think there is a warehouse in the commercial district, so I don't know why it wouldn't be in the use table if we already have one.
Could be grandfathered.
Is that saying that we're not going to allow any future warehouses?
I believe it's a
think
type of
there-
commercial use and it's allowed as a commercial use. I would suggest for the sake of time that we put our comments in writing, send them to you, Sarah. And unless they seem controversial, you could just incorporate them. Otherwise, bring them back to the next meeting. Because
So-
this will take
yeah.
too much time.
Sarah Melish has got some advice for us, maybe.
Yeah, and before Sarah Melish, just my suggestion actually would be that we had said we were going to talk with Mark Bobrowski. I don't think, Sue, we heard back from him, or were we able to email him?
I've emailed him, but I have not heard back.
Okay, this seems to me that somebody, either town council or Mark Bobrowski, can answer the question of, is there a problem defining things that are not in the bylaw? So is that, okay? So in this case, Sarah Melish, what would you like to add?
She's on mute. Sarah, you're on mute.
Or you're on mute.
Maybe that was a. oh,
Yeah. So we've had a recent case where there was a warehouse and it was a non-conforming use. So the question is in what districts do you want to allow that use? And if you don't want to allow that use, I don't think it needs to be defined.
So the question here is whether we need to define it, not whether or not we're allowing it or not allowing it. So
If
that's
you're going to
allowing it is
allow
a
it,
different-
if you need to allow it, you need to define it.
yes, agreed.
Yeah.
So let's,
Is there any hurt in defining all of them?
no, that's
Or
my,
at least, I mean,
Enter into my pain.
so these uses are in the use table. Thank you, Mary, for going through this. And I'd like someone to just take a stab at, or we can ask Mark Bobrowski to create definitions for these. So as a next step, either somebody can, let's start by asking him, if that's okay. Does that make sense to people? We need to
I guess,
complete.
I
We got
would.
'em.
Oh, sorry, Chris.
I was just gonna say, he probably has them at his fingertips.
Yeah, well, I was gonna say, to save money, we could just go to other towns' bylaws and pluck out the definitions.
Sure. I mean, Mary, would you be willing to do that?
If you want me to do those, sure.
That'd be great. Okay, so Mary's gonna start this. Great. So I'm gonna say to pluck. Sorry if this has gotten small. Okay, that's on the definitions. That's section 2 of the changes. So that's section 2 and section 3. Section 1 and 2 we worked our way through. Sorry, I'm gonna
Sarah, we actually didn't go through all of section 1, because there was a couple items that were added. Perhaps not a big deal, but there was a couple bullets promoting the development of a sustainable coastal community, and then one implementing the recommendations of the town's master plan.
Yep, we talked about those both in our workshop as well as last meeting. Are there any objections to those?
Just that they need to be highlighted, that they're new.
Let's finalize where we're at and then talk about how we're going to talk about this with the public. Okay. So what I want to do is get a final language, and then we can talk about what things, how we talk about them with the public once we know what the scope is. So I think we had agreement that that's the case. Definitions, I think we're pretty much worked through. Unless then we go to section 3. Sorry for the scrolling. Section 3 is the establishment of districts, and the important thing here is that we are now defining residential district 1, D1 and D2 as separate districts, which they have always are currently described as 2 distinct districts with the same name. Is that a fair way of putting it, Chris? Oh, you're mute.
Yes, that's the way to describe it.
So I think we're simply not making any change in this case, but just breaking, yeah, something with the same name into its 2 parts for greater clarity.
We were going to get a map on that also, I believe.
So the next thing is the zoning map. We currently are using a 2004 map. Sue, any update on that map?
They are working on it, and I expect it. I expect it anytime now. The first iteration.
So we should have a new map that we need to look at.
Yep.
Then there are some definitions: center line, lot line, parallel line, split lots. I didn't receive any comments on any of these, but I am just going to make you go through these a little bit. Just so that is section 3. The map.
So the split lots is a big one, the 3.4.2. That's a change. That should be highlighted.
This one right here. So oh, this one here. Does that this one?
Yeah.
So when a lot is transected by a zoning district boundary, the regulations of the bylaw applicable to the larger part of the area of such lot may also be by the grant of a special permit of the planning board to be deemed to govern the smaller part beyond such zoning district boundary. So putting aside how we communicate this to the public, do we object? Are we comfortable with this definition?
I believe that we are, Sarah. We discussed this very definition at length during the meetings with Mark Babowski.
Yep. So so what I'm going to do right now is ask for any objections in with the exception of the things that we've talked about for sections 1 through 3. They're not final language, but do we have, in terms of the content and intent, are there any objections to what we've talked about in 1 through 3? Okay, so we're going to move those forward in their intent okay, section 4, I think the general, what we were trying to do was to simplify and make this easier to use. Recognize that in the process, there may be some small changes that resulted also that you guys in your prior work came up with. I'm going to jump to the zoning use table. Sorry. Thought I had it pulled up. Sorry. So this is the table that has been on the website for some time. We worked on it quite extensively before the fall town meeting. And the idea here, to remember everybody, refresh everybody's memory, is that we have the districts across the top and the uses here. And we say yes, no, or with the ZBA special permit or planning board special permit. I believe there's a key here up above. Okay. And we went through this quite extensively in the fall. And the idea here, and Chris added, we need to go a careful read through it one more time for sure. He added notes where he pulled out, so conversion one, basically all the narrative that is in the existing section 4 and put them as notes. But I think that we put this on the website and asked people, said it was not official, but we asked people for any comments, and I don't believe we've received any. I don't know if anybody's looked at it or seen it or questioned it, but I'm not aware that we've had any comments. So it's fairly extensive, but the LCD, which we talked about earlier tonight, would have to have the commercial use of the laboratory added in here. So that's one change that needs to happen with special permit allowed. So it's a change that would need to go in here. So we can't possibly look at this on a screen, and I just wanted to refresh everybody where we were with this. This is the notes, the table. And for anybody who's not on the board, it's also on the website under planning board. So we would appreciate anybody's careful read of it and any errors that omissions. And then going back to the narrative. So let's just talk about the table. What now has to happen next to make people comfortable with the table? Certainly another careful read, make sure there are no errors, but do we have an agreement that the table is where we want to be in its trying to finalize it in the next few days to 2 weeks?
So I have a lot of, well, not a lot, but I have comments on the actual, just at first the table part, some things that are having, planning board versus ZBA versus none. Things have switched since the last version that I have. So I'm just wondering why those changes occurred. So there's some of that detail. And then I'm still not clear where we are with the senior housing, if that's coming forward, because I know it's in the definitions, but it's not on the use table. Is that a future meeting, a future town meeting?
So senior housing is among the zoning changes that we put on the list to contemplate for spring. I'm a little pessimistic personally as to whether or not we're going to be able to, if town meeting is April 4th, I'm not sure we'll get through that. So I'll take it. Why don't we talk about that for a second? Well, let's table that for a minute. Let's so there's senior housing is one issue, and there's Chris, maybe you can clarify where we, I think we worked through this in the fall, but any comments?
I'm not aware of any changes to special permitting. Who does it? There may have been some typos that we fixed, and maybe that's why they changed. But as far as I know, this is what's currently reflected in the current zoning bylaw.
That's right, Chris. I think there's some changes that we caught in those interim meetings when we were trying to prepare it.
Right. So I think that the latest version is on our SharePoint as well as on the town website. This is I believe it's the same one. And I apologize that it's not in Word, it's a PDF, but it gets, when you try to put comments in a Word document that's this tightly formatted, it's very tough. So I'm going to ask that everybody look at this table between now and the next meeting and bring the specific changes that anybody else that we want to do. Chris and I will take a read through it again. With the intention of using it as a way to simplify the bylaw.
Do you want any of my questions? I mean, I was at those meetings where this was revised, so.
Sure, do you have specific questions right now? Specific comments?
If you don't mind, just real quick, like
go through them.
under agricultural uses, I thought for number 4 that was consistent with what we currently have, that would not apply to District Ds, the RD1 and RD2.
Okay, I'm gonna open another doc. Hold on. I'm gonna make notes in another document and then share those notes in a minute.
I don't understand the comment. Are you suggesting that we should not allow agricultural use in District D?
Well, if that's how our current bylaw is, and I don't know what would have changed.
Okay, so
If it's allowed in any of the residential zoning districts at all, I don't recall if it is, but if it's allowed in A, B, and C, shouldn't it also be allowed in D?
It is allowed in D.
I think because of the lot sizes.
It's no different than some of the other lot sizes in town.
Where's number 3? It goes 1, 2, 4.
I think it's ag use meant to be renumbered.
Okay.
So it might be easier rather than, debating. I can just send you the list.
I think that would be great. And then we can go through it and maybe, actually, maybe Chris and Mary, you could work on the table to just get it, check to make sure the uses are as they currently are, or bring any departures that we need to figure out. Does that make sense?
I'll be glad to do that. Yep.
Yeah,
Okay.
sure.
Great. Okay, so let's go back to sections 1 through 4. Let's put the LCD aside for a minute. Are there other, I mean, that's a pretty big change. We're going to remove the narrative of the prior version and summarize it in a table. That is the predominant issue here. The parking and use table needs to be inserted. This is as does the dimensions use table, and I didn't get that done before this. But again, you guys have spent a lot of time on this, and this sections need to still be cross-referenced. Do we have any objection to this as a direction to try to head for section 4? Okay.
I don't have any objection. I just have some comments on each of the tables.
Yeah, great. If you and Chris can kind of work through those and get a final version, that would be great. And I will make sure that the dimensions use table dimensional table gets in here. I'll do that tonight. Sarah Mellish, you have a comment?
Yeah, so we're being hit hard in the ZBA by conforming to the zoning bylaw. So the extent to which we can adjust it to meet the expectations of the residents would be great.
Okay, what specific areas? Let me go to the table.
We have ADUs.
Yeah.
We have uses in districts that are not, so we have uses not allowed in districts, and ZBA cannot issue a variance. So if somebody wants to do a multifamily home and a single family residence, it can't be done.
Mm-hmm.
And do we want to allow that?
So it seems to me that that's a good question, but we don't have we're trying to make I think our strategy has been make the changes to get the bylaw readable as part one, and then make the changes individually or collectively with a second process. But I'm open to hearing from the board.
I have sent a letter to the editor advising people, if we don't like what the ZBA is doing in conformance with the zoning bylaws, they need to go to the planning board
Mhm.
and town meeting.
Thank you, Sarah.
Well, the other thing, if you haven't sent your letter yet, Sarah, you might refer them to the use table that's on the website. Because
It
it's
went tonight, it's going to be in Thursday, Friday.
well, maybe you can amend it to refer them to this table because it makes it a whole lot easier to understand what the uses are.
I mean, I think the challenge is that people think ZBA can do anything you want. And they're constrained by a zoning bylaw, which is approved by the residents of Manchester.
Can I just make a comment about this? I think
Please.
it has been the standard in the state for forever that you cannot grant use variances. But I don't know if it's legally allowable, but I think it would be great if the zoning board could, through a variance process, grant a use variance in some instances. And just to be really general, almost 3/4 of our lots in town are non-conforming. So it's impossible to make a perfect zoning map of a town because it would be a checkerboard that would make you dizzy to do it accurately. So I believe the town needs some latitude, some way to put some appropriate anomalies, some appropriate uses in certain spots where they're currently not allowed. Now, I would like somebody to get legal opinion on whether we can do that, because I would support it.
Okay, Gary, I'm gonna stop for just a minute on that and just say, we can't take that up tonight. I think we got to stick to what zoning changes do we want to get to an April 4th town meeting.
I
And
agree,
the
but what's on your list?
question that Sarah Melish has asked us to consider is whether we want to make changes to the allowed uses, probably predominantly in the residential districts, but maybe not entirely. We are contemplating a limited commercial use change as one sort of minor, not minor, but one change. Do we want to take up use changes in residential districts for the April 4th town meeting? That means hammering through these and addressing, or do we want to stay with the strategy that we had been pursuing, which was to get the bylaw kind of organized and then take the use changes up later?
It would be requiring a special permit by the ZBA.
That still is a use change. If you change, if I'm looking at, yes.
Right, so today, use change requires a variance which ZBA is not allowed to provide. And so if you want a special permit to provide a use change, that's change.
So in this case, if you wanted a 2-family dwelling in residential A, we could make a proposed change to town meeting that is ZBA in this case.
A special permit.
Well, our table would say ZBA, which is our code for a special permit by ZBA.
Right.
So I want to hear from the planning board members as whether or not we want to take up those use changes. Not whether we want to take them up ever, but whether we want to take them up for the April 4th meeting.
I think once we take them up, it puts Sarah's group on hold. Am I correct? And I think maybe we should just stick with the recodification, with just cleaning up the numbering and the order and the wordings.
Yeah.
I mean, that would be my opinion, since we have such a small window here of time.
Yeah. The other thing is, I'm thinking that we can may be able to frame the debate simply on the changing narrative to a table and limit the debate to that point on town meeting floor to get this thing cleaned up. And then in the subsequent years, address some of these changes, because I think that there are more of them than just ADUs or two-family dwellings in a residential district.
Sarah, I wasn't suggesting we do it now. I was just, since Sarah Melish brought it up, I was just saying I support it because I think we need to have some latitude in town, but it has to be done later. We don't have time, obviously.
Yeah. So I think anybody have any objection to pushing that, acknowledging that conversation needs to happen, but that we don't have time to do it. Sarah, if you stick around, you'll see our schedule is extremely compressed. And, action to that strategy. Okay, hearing nothing, we're going to move on. Section 4, I'm going to ask that if everybody to please read it one more time, bring any comments to me by the end, by Friday, please, so we can get this ready for going to a public hearing. Okay.
Sarah, I put a question mark in the document on contractor's yard because I think it needs a definition.
Okay, Mary, can you add that to your list?
What was it? What was it?
Contractor's yard. Thank you, Gary. I'll put that on the list too.
Because if someone stores a bunch of stuff and they do contracting, at what point does the neighbor who doesn't like them say it's a contractor's yard? It needs a definition.
Well, it's by special permit though. If it's less than 2 acres, so.
Exactly.
Okay, that'd be helpful to get a definition for that. That's a good suggestion. Okay, any other concerns there?
Mike, so 2 questions. One, I guess, what is the process if we're getting comments to you? When are we then discussing the comments at an open meeting? And
yeah, I think what I'll do is track changes on this version. I'll do a track changes on this version. I'm going to, so that we can see what those changes have been. I will do it by probably Saturday. If you get me comments by Thursday or Friday, then I'll do it by Saturday.
I don't know that we ever landed anywhere officially on the one commercial vehicle of that size being parked. We talked about it round and round, but I don't think there was any conclusion. In 4.3.3 4A.
Do we want to talk about it again, or do we want to go back and
I believe that we did have a consensus. We talked about it, and we did have a consensus that this was the weight limit to use.
That's not my recollection, but if you could point to the meeting minutes, I'd be happy to check.
What?
We can also just vote it again at the next meeting.
Yep. Why don't we look for the minutes on that one? I'm just did a quick search on my searchable minutes and didn't find it. So, I mean, I found more than the number of documents I can pull up right now. So let's put that one on the parking lot, Laura. Commercial vehicles in section
4.3.3.4.
number 4. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, I'm going to move on from anything else on sections 1 through 4. Chris and I are going to have to think about this limited commercial district change. Chris, you looked at the special permit. So the existing section 4 has a fairly lengthy description of special permit conditions for the LCD. But I think Chris and I think that they're pretty duplicative with other where special permit is described elsewhere. Is that fair enough?
That is fair. And actually, some of them are redundant. Some of them are just kind of silly, like requiring someone to file annual permits and all the annual permits and so forth to the planning board, which makes no sense. So I think we could probably strike all 4 of those and be fine.
Okay, so people concerned about that should also take a look at that section. It's the LCD 4.4.6. There's some sort of stray, I guess, for lack of a better word, special permit conditions. So I'll also make a note of that 4.4.6 notes. So I'm going to send you all an email with these reminders. But
And I can add that these things could be added as conditions of a special permit if the board so felt. But
right. Okay. All right. So I'm going to jump now to.
Sarah, just a quick question. When you say you're updating one of the documents, are you looking at the version that you posted to SharePoint?
It is
Where
SharePoint. Yes, it is
Okay.
SharePoint.
So for definitions and so forth, we're adding our comments in there, so you're capturing them.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
So the next one I wanted to take up, because it's got a little bit of diciness, and you have, prior to Lauren and me joining the board, there was a fair amount of discussion about some aspects of this, and we tried to do it in the fall. This is the section 12 administration. So I'm sorry, I'm not in slideshow mode, but there are a couple of things in this section. It is a moving section 7 administration to section 12 and adding in some things about Dover amendments and some process things. But there are two hot buttons, in my opinion, that I want to talk about. The first is input from the ZBA chair, Sarah Melish. And then I asked her to give us a detail. She would has suggested that we change the ZBA makeup from 5 members with 2 alternates to 7 full-time members with a 4 vote to approve. And this is her rationale. Sarah, do you want to just speak to this briefly? Well, maybe she stepped away. She said they need 4 votes to approve an application. You can read my notes here. If one member misses, they cannot vote. And so calling in alternates on the fly doesn't work.
Sorry,
yeah.
I'm now unmuted.
So anything else to add is just that it's kind of unworkable as it is.
Right, under the state zoning bylaws, 4 people must vote for an application. Currently, we have 5 full-time members, so 4 people must vote for it. And under Mullen decision, 1 person cannot miss more than 2 meetings. In 2021, we had 35 continuances. And so it makes sense that rather than calling in alternates to fill in, that we have full-time members to be there so that we have the appropriate backup, make the votes we need. If we don't have 4 members voting, it's a vote by construction.
Gary.
Sarah, with all due respect, I really think we can't begin to tackle this subject for this Springtown meeting. We have too many other things. It's a potentially controversial issue. There's a lot to discuss about it, I believe. So I would just recommend putting it on for fall town meeting.
Can you I think it's pretty simple, actually. Yeah. And so Gary, I know you've been on the ZBA. Can you give a 2-minute version of why this is a bad idea?
Well, now you've got to have a bigger quorum. So there's pros and cons to needing a bigger quorum. The way I understand it, you would need 5 votes, not 4, if you have a 7-member board.
No. So if we have 7 members, we need 4 votes. If we have 6 members, we need 4 votes. If we have 5 members, we need 5 votes. So there's no difference in the amount of votes. And the challenge is that if you don't engage your alternates in the process, You run we've had 35 continuances in 2021. If somebody misses 2 meetings, they can't vote.
Okay.
And
Okay, but-
we just need, and it with remote working, and we just need the depth.
You,
Okay.
do you agree or disagree that it puts a bigger burden on getting a quorum to have your meeting, that you'll need 4
No,
people?
it doesn't. We need 7 people. A quorum is 5.
Okay. Mary?
My only question is, I would assume this would be a whole separate article at town meeting. This wouldn't be part of the recodification, am I correct?
Well, the reason I raise it is that it is in this section. It is in the administration section. And the zoning board is defined in this section. So that's why it's there. So,
And so people understand, if we don't have 4 members available to vote, it's constructive approval.
so Mary, that's the rationale. It is in the existing bylaw, and it was in Mark Bobrowski's administration section. In its current, it is currently called out in the as the current situation, describing our current status.
This doesn't need any kind of other approvals besides just a town meeting vote? This does not have to go, to the state or anything for this change? I guess because you're appointed, not elected. I know if we wanted to change the planning board down to 5 people, we have to get all kinds of permissions.
I think the change we have is, when I've been running the board, the alternates have been participating. Prior to that, we only called them in when they needed them. But we recently discovered the Mullen ruling, which says if somebody is not there for 2 meetings, they can't vote. And we've had 35 continuances in 2021.
I can tell you, having been an applicant in the Concom, it's the same issue. And as an applicant for many continued hearings, we paid strict attention to who attended and who did not.
You did
As an
better than
applicant.
we did.
No, but as an applicant for the tennis court fiasco. I think it can, it's definitely a savvy attorneys will know this rule. So I think it's a very, so I think we've heard the ZBA chair's request. Similar to the question that we had on the use table, I think we need to know whether we want to include it in this town meeting, knowing that by putting this section on the warrant, except as a renumbering, but with all its, the proposal was to put the full narrative, it would be subject to amendment, which strikes me as a more complicated thing. And that so I'd like to hear from people whether we should move this change forward and Gary, we've heard that you're opposed. Others have a strong feeling one way or the other.
Well, I have a question. I think maybe this is even simpler. What Sarah is really saying is no more, all the 2 alternates would become full-time members. They'd just be at every meeting.
Right.
And you could almost do that administratively instead of through the zoning bylaw.
No, so the
can't.
bylaw restricts us to 5 full-time members and 2 alternates. And for the last year or 2, I've included the alternates in our meetings. But technically, they can't be included.
Yep. So This is
Sarah,
the same. This
excuse
is
me.
the, no, Barry, hold on. Just to Chris's question. This is the existing language from the Zoning Board of Appeals shall consist of 5 regular members and 2 associate members appointed by the Board of Selectmen. Regular members, that's the new one. Yeah, that's exactly the same as its current. So it says associate rather than alternate, Sarah. I don't know what that means.
So we have a first alternate and a second alternate.
But the bylaws,
They can only
bylaws.
vote if a full-time member is not there. But if a full-time member misses 2 meetings, somebody has to fill in for them.
I guess my point, this section here is the existing bylaw. And
Yeah,
you have 2 regular members and 2 associate members. And I don't know what associate members means, how that's
the
defined.
alternate.
No, well, I'm telling you, the existing bylaw calls them associate members.
Okay,
I don't know if that has any, if that helps you at all. Maybe, probably not. Maybe it's unclear. Maybe a question for town council again. The question I'd like our board to talk about is whether or not we want to work with Sarah to change this, or we want to keep it as it is for this town meeting. Chris, thoughts?
I think it's a tiny change, but I see Sue's got a comment.
Sue's got a comment.
Sue?
Sarah.
So I just asked general law, chapter 40A, that states any Board of Appeals established here under shall consist of 3 to 5 members. So I wonder if it might be more complicated than just changing our own bylaw. So I think before we get into a contracted conversation about it, we should check with town council.
All right, good.
And maybe Sarah has already done so.
no, I think that's what the Mass General Law says is if you have 5 members, 4 need to be voting in accordance with the application.
No, I
If
just, no, this
if you
this
have
is-
7
Oh.
members, it needs to be a majority of 4.
No,
No,
but
this-
she's talking about
this is
changing it
just-
to 7.
This is just straight out of this. I cut and paste this out. It wasn't talking about who votes when. It just says this is what it is. So I don't really care. I just think before a long conversation, we just find out if it's possible.
Yep,
I
okay,
guess.
we will check with town council on this one before we go forward. But I'm going to ask that the board, our board, think about this, because if town council says we can move ahead, then we need to decide if we want to move ahead. So let's table that one for right now. The other one is the format of this document. If you haven't looked at it, and there are a few comments I think on it. I highlighted the Sarah Mellish change. The left column is the proposed and the right is the existing. Sorry for the formatting problems, but this is taken right out of the review that you folks did with Mark Bobrowski.
You're not sharing the screen.
I'm not, oh, sorry, sharing my own screen with myself. Sorry. There you go. I have 2 screens. Okay, so the left screen is the Mark Bobrowski, and there are a number of additions to this around the Dover Amendment and some cleaning up of new of fees and so forth, special permits, granting criteria and procedures. So we should take a real close look at that. And but before we do that, the planning board is also proposed in the new version to be have this section called Establishment Powers, Regulations and Fees. And the proposed Mark Bobrowski language describes the current state of affairs, 7 elected members. Interestingly, he says, and 1 appointed associate members. I think we should probably not try to worry about that right now. with the following powers and regulations and so forth. Now, let me jump to, I did a little research because I know this issue has been discussed at length, and I know, Gary, you highlighted that in the review. I asked Sue to figure out how we are actually constituted, because in the old administration section, it's silent on planning board membership. It's in fact defined by Mass General laws. And on January 25th, 2021, the planning board voted affirmatively that to recommend to the selectmen that the planning board be comprised of 5 members appointed by the Board of Selectmen. And there was a proposed, I can pull that up, 5-point article, and the current status, as I think I understand it, is that currently resides with the Board of Selectmen. So the question for us as we move this section toward town meeting is to, and let me finish, sorry, for Laura, who may not be up to speed on this, is that if this change of planning board to be appointed was approved by town meeting, it would have to go to the legislature to be enacted. So there are several, the Mass General laws requires that towns have elected boards and cities have appointed planning boards. So the question, I think, is—
That's not accurate, Sarah. It gives towns the option. They don't must have elected boards.
Okay, sorry. If they exercise the option, though, don't we have to go to the legislature? I was under the impression that if we went to an appointed board, it had to be approved by the legislature. Sue's nodding. Yes.
Yes, I believe that.
Correct.
It's an
You're
option and if
correct.
we choose it,
That's,
yeah.
yeah.
Okay. So the question is not whether or not we're in favor or not in favor of this appointed member change, this appointment, the plan, this here. We can reconsider that for sure, but that's not my question. My question is, should we include it in this administration question section? And if we do, then should it reflect our current status? Or should we push the point and try to move forward this change at town meeting? So we could just remove it, which would be parallel to our current zoning, and kick it down the road, kick the can down the road a little bit, or tackle it head on. And I'd like to hear what people think we should do strategically, again, given our timing.
Sarah, can I comment on this? This was all thought through. Now it's been, I don't even know how long ago it was, a year or 2 years ago, whenever it was we
January
voted.
a year ago, January 25th, 2021.
Yeah, there was a mention of the planning board in an earlier version of our bylaws that somehow got removed, just erased for some reason. So it's been a blank for many years. So that should be filled. And what we voted on is text to fill that section of the bylaw. Yes, the Board of Selectmen will have to take action thereafter, but it doesn't mean we have to wait for them to take action first. We can vote in this bylaw section which restructures things, and the selectmen will have to take some action. But Alan Wilson and Town Council, there was plenty of back and forth and input given from Town Council about what would have to happen between the selectmen and the state legislature. It's not undue. It's not. It may seem like a lot, but towns do it. It's what's done. It's the process. It doesn't mean we don't do this bylaw section. That's my take on it.
Other comments?
So, yeah, I have a comment, and it's the same comment I had last January. I think it's worth discussing and having the town think about it. I don't think it's appropriate for the planning board to make the recommendation and do it. I think Gary would disagree, and that's why it's a democracy, I guess. But I think it should be moved forward for the town to discuss, and But I think it should be probably moved forward by the Board of Selectmen and not by the Planning Board. However, we did take a vote to move it forward, and I think we should stand by that vote.
We voted to move it to the Board of Selectmen.
That's
And it's
correct.
just, it's just, they would been consumed with other things, SLV in particular at the time, and it hasn't come up again.
Ann Harrison, can I,
Yeah. Go ahead, Ann.
Ann, go ahead, Ann. Oh, you're on mute.
What happened at the Board of Selectmen, we had, it's not SLV that's holding us back or anything else. The problem with it coming up at the at the fall town meeting, actually both town meetings, is that we got to the point of looking at the warrants, and the spring town meeting was outdoors, and we wanted to keep the warrant short. And this one didn't make the cut. And we had the same problem at the fall town meeting. Indoors, yes, but we felt that because of the COVID situation, it would be very difficult to get a representative attendance at the town meeting. I think that moving it, despite our inability to do it, I think moving this through the Board of Selectmen is the right way to do it. Otherwise, you will have your whole package of changes tied up for hours at town meeting on something that's much less important. Well, it's very important to some of you, but I think it's less critical to the town than getting the recodification approved. If COVID has receded enough so that we can have a normal-ish town meeting in April, I will certainly ask that the Board of Selectmen push this forward. But I think putting it in as an administrative note in section 12 is not really the right way to bring it in front of the town. So I can't promise that we won't look at the warrant again and say, you know, there are, well, for example, we would like to change, some of the selectmen would like to change the name from the Board of Selectmen to the Select Board. And I think on the whole, we're probably going to look at that and say, that doesn't make the cut. So, you know, it's a question of, we have already a huge warrant just dealing with your changes. And there are several other things going on in town that are probably more important, that the selectmen are probably going to decide are less important than other things. And we're trying to keep the town meeting under 6 days.
Okay.
5 days.
I
3
think
days.
that, so I'll tell you, my opinion, I share Ann's opinion that we should, my personal view is that I recognize that that prior to Laura and me joining the board, there was considerable time spent on this, but that it isn't as important as the other things we are trying to do. And that it could derail the other things we're trying to do. I should, in full disclosure, say, however, that it's a bit disingenuous on my part because I'm not sure I agree with the change. So I think somebody else should make a motion about what we're going to do about this rather than me, because I would, well, you hear I've been honest about my thoughts on that. I'm being honest about it.
Yeah,
So-
and my comments, this is Mary, is I agree with what Chris had said and what you had said, Sarah. I think, you know, I was one of the votes against this. I think there'd have to be a good reason why it would even be presented as at town meeting to vote this way, why to appoint versus elect. I think it muddies the water trying to do it within this context. I think it is controversial. I think it's, in my opinion, it's a political move, and I think that should be separate from a recodification.
Can I suggest that we remove it, and that kind of is moot on the point on it either way? It is the status quo, but it puts it in the selectmen's court as a separate issue rather than in ours.
You're suggesting do nothing because it's in the selectmen's court.
Yeah,
anyway.
and remove it from the draft. So
Right, I
by
agree with that.
removing it, we're not endorsing the current or future state.
You're just striking the clause entirely of the organization of the board.
Leaving
Yeah.
it to the current the status quo.
But the board's vote approving it or asking it to be,
Dan,
it still stands.
that's right, until we revote it. Yeah,
We're not revoking anything. We're just not doing anything.
we're not
encouraging
we're not thumbing our nose at the vote, nor are we trying to put it in, nor are we trying to sneak it in a section of a larger document. So I'd like to see us take it out for the moment. Does anybody want to make a motion to that effect? I'd like to actually vote on this one.
Where is it? I don't see it in here.
It's section, I can share my screen again.
Oh, I see. Oh, it's with the
sorry.
associate member as well. Okay.
Yeah.
Because that
Yeah.
actually wasn't highlighted, that portion of it.
Right, Gary had struck it, and I unstruck it and put it in yellow to highlight it, so people would be able to find it.
Well,
So I would
what's
suggest
in
that,
there is not the text that was voted on. That's why I struck through it, because we voted on a different text.
I know, that's what, but I was using Mark Bobrowski's text, I'm sorry. It came to my attention late that this was in here, and that it took me some digging to find the minutes and other things, so.
So what does
We're
it
just-
mean to vote? What does it mean to vote that you don't want to bring this to town meeting now? It seems like it's a vote to nullify the previous vote. Because when would it be brought to town meeting?
No,
What
I would
does? it do it?
take this section out, just remove it. I think I'd say, I would take that out and just say 12, we can leave a spacer for it, 12.4 left, intentionally left blank.
And our vote was never a vote to bring it to town meeting. The vote that was taken with the planning board was to bring it to the Board of Selectmen.
I have the language of the vote. I think. No, I don't, sorry. I think we
It
do
was
need
to
to
make the
like to
recommendation.
have a vote on this one to just tie this up for this town meeting. If we're going to bring this section forward, and we had, given that we had intended to bring it forward, and this was in it, I guess we didn't read it very carefully for the fall town meeting, that we remove it for this, or, if somebody wants to make a motion otherwise, I'd like to see us vote this so that we don't have to talk about it anymore until April 5th. Or until the selectmen move it forward.
I make a motion to remove the language in section 12.3 of the proposed.
12.4. 12.4.
Oh, what I printed out, it was 12.3.1.
Okay, well, it may need to be renumbered. The section, can we say the section relating to planning board establishment and powers and regulations?
Yes. To take out the language that says, oh, I'm sorry, I'm looking at the wrong one. I don't even have that language in mind.
Well, this is what's on SharePoint. This is the new administration section. So I'm looking, this is live right now. So it would be to remove the section 4 point related to planning board establishment, power and powers.
12.4.1 is what I see.
Yeah.
For the number.
It's really just it's really just 4.4.1. The powers and
4.1
regulations
establishment.
should be the same. It's really just this section.
I would
Sorry.
like to see the language of our vote before we vote on this.
All right, I can find it. Hold on.
We could, I mean, maybe that's the next meeting next week,
Nope,
but
I got it right here. Here it is.
Sarah, while you're doing that, and the other option is to keep it in and show the existing makeup. Is that fair? There's two options. The option is to take it
Yeah.
out or to leave it in to show the existing makeup of the board, and therefore it would be a placeholder if
Right.
things changed.
Right, here's, can you see my screen? This general bylaw,
No, not yet, Sarah.
We
A
can't
different
see it.
screen, I think.
sorry. When you switch things that are screen showing in Zoom, it doesn't like it. So these are the minutes from January 25th. So Mr. Gilbert submitted a draft bylaw proposed as a general bylaw, which would decrease the number of planning boards from 7 to 5. All of them would be appointed and not voted. And it was voted 5 to 2, I believe. Yeah, 5 in favor and 2 abstaining.
Right, so
Um,
that vote was just yeah,
Yeah.
that had nothing to do with recodification.
Right, but nonetheless, here's the and I'm gonna have to Mike, can you see the article itself now? Planning article. I don't have to reshare, sorry.
So Sarah, could you just help me? Because are we supposed to be going by article or by, because I'm looking at
Let's just finish.
Article 8, which is administration.
It is, I used a number called PB8 administration, which is just, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 of the changes we wanted to take up. The file name is Article PB8 administration, new administration. If you look at there's like a roadmap document that tells which ones are which. I didn't know how else to do it. I was trying not to use.
I guess there's so many iterations of so many documents, and I pulled down one that's Article Planning Board 8, and it has the side by side, and that's what I've been using.
Yep, that's correct. Okay, we'll come back to that in a minute. But Gary said what was voted. This is the vote. This was your vote in January, and this was the general laws amendment. Just people asked what was asked. And this is it was to basically have 5 members appointed. Okay, I think Mary has made.
I actually have a suggestion here. And this might appease everybody. Since this is going to require an act of the legislature, while we were waiting for that to happen, and although Gary thinks it's rudimentary, I think it could take years, we won't have a planning board established under the zoning bylaw. So I think we should probably, under recodification, establish the planning board, then have a separate article in the warrant in the town meeting to change it. And if that passes, then once it gets approved by the Attorney General and by the legislature, it goes into effect whenever that happens. But I think to just leave it blank in the meantime is probably not a good idea.
I think we don't need this bylaw to establish the planning board. We're already established by Mass General laws. We don't have any general law or planning or zoning establishing us now. We tried to find.
No, it's a problem.
You have
Is
a
it?
town meeting vote in whatever it was in the 50s or 20s,
Yeah.
whatever.
There's a town meeting vote,
The handwritten
thing. So we are established.
Well,
So
And you're
I was-
established as 7-member board.
So my argument for removing it from this is that it takes the issue out of town meeting. If we have it in there, then it can be amended and debated, and given that we leave it as a blank section, and then when the selectmen take it up, perhaps we would send them a suggestion that it be amendment to zoning, not to the general bylaws.
I agree with that for what it's worth. I mean, we don't have it now, so it's not changing anything.
Yeah, I think just striking it for now is the most neutral approach to it. And let it go through the BOS. I mean, we have so many substantive things that we're trying to push through. And clearly there's a lot of, this is before my time, but there's clearly a lot of, you know, different views on it. So we have so much else to do. I mean, we all have different feelings about it. We pushed it, sounds like we pushed it through the Board of Selectmen, maybe just eliminate the clause for now and let it go through that route.
Okay, Ron, what do you think?
Yeah, I agree with what's been said. I think we have a lot of other things, you know, to get past with baby steps. So, I mean, just to add another possible controversial item to the town meeting at this time is probably not a good thing to do.
Okay, Chris, Chris, are you okay with removing it for the moment, despite your prior comment?
Well, I still think we should put something in there, and we can certainly put in something that reflects the what we're doing.
If they were a board of 7 members or something like
Yeah,
that,
yeah.
or seven
Elected.
volunteer members, or however you want to state it, or just
An
7 members.
elected board of 7.
Oh, so yeah, we're
Well-
elected to 7 members. And then if the Board of Selectmen brings up the town meeting and the town meeting changes it, so be it. That's great.
Well, the elected or appointed is the hot button issue, right? So if you just
Yeah,
say a
and
board
we're
of 7
currently
members,
elected,
does that
so
cover it?
until they change it, we're gonna be elected. I
So
just think it's kinda
my
funny
opinion is if we put something in, we have to put something in that's true to fact today. So
Yeah.
we're an elected 7-member board.
That's what I'm
For
saying.
3-year term, for 3-year terms. I mean, there's a whole,
Right, there's a
get into a
whole,
lot of the details here.
okay. I'm gonna leave it in for right now, because that seems to be that we seem to be, and I'm gonna ask, we're gonna, you know, the cleaner we get this before we go to a public hearing, the better. So,
The town clerk
it's-
can give it language on that.
okay. I'm gonna leave it in for right now, but think a little bit more about that. Let's move on. Are there any other comments on section 12? This is all straight out of the Bobrowski. I guess I'd ask Laura, you thought quite a bit about, and maybe Chris to look at the criteria for the special permit, especially given the LCD questions. There's other places that special permit is called out. And so I'm wondering if 12 point, let me share it with you, sorry. If 12.5.2 here is sufficient. I think that needs a look by somebody who can really dig into it and make sure that we're covered on what we want to see happen there.
Sarah, yeah, Sarah, I did spend a lot of time on section 6.
Yeah.
I think that's PB 11. I'm not sure. But so, I mean, I took a glance at this one and I felt like this gets out of it in a general way. And then section 6 is where you do the sort of heavy lift and everything that's in the, so I made a lot of red lines on section 6, which we should all look at and talk about more.
Yeah, okay, so
I
maybe
think
we
we're
just,
not trying to do that tonight. So I left this
Yeah.
alone. I did make a couple of little comments in here, which you might just want to
Yeah.
go to. And, you know, if we think these are problematic, we can talk about them. So 12.6.4, I just added a clarification under site plan requirements. The word flood, or sorry, year, it said 100 flood. That's my comment there, 100-year flood. On number 6, all wetland surface water is an area subject to 100-year flood. I added that number on that letter back in, excuse me, that word. I'm losing my, and then further down on section
Bicycle.
Yeah, 12.6.7 decision criteria.
Yep.
Number 2 and number 6, I added the words bicycle for
Great.
clarity.
Anybody have a problem with adding bicycle? Gonna accept that insertion. Okay,
And last comment under, let's see, section 12.8.5 site plan contents. Section 11 or item 11,
mm-hmm,
where we're asking them to document the existing conditions of the site.
mm-hmm,
Where there's a lot more focus on trees, I said provide the DBH diameter breast height for all existing site trees that are equal to or over 6-inch DBH growing outside of a sort of forested area, so you don't have to document that, but
yeah, I just think
where
we should
towns,
spell that out. We can.
We need a definition of DBA. Yeah.
I
Now
can do that. Well, I can give you a definition of DBH if you need it.
I think
It
it's
has it's 4.5 feet above the grade, above ground. But for towns that have significant trees as a definition, 6 inches is typical. So while we don't require that definition at this point, I thought that it would be useful to at least document it.
Okay, does anybody have a problem with that?
Sarah, breast height rather than breast health. But I appreciate.
Thank you, Sue. Oh,
Thank you. Okay,
that's just an arborist term.
great. Thank you for your careful read there.
Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, I think that pretty much gets us through section 12. It's 9:30.
Sarah, I've got one comment on this,
Yep.
which
Yep.
I think which might be a transition to next week. So I think Laura's exactly right. The performance standards need to be reviewed carefully, but I do think we could refer to them here. That the special permit should acknowledge or should reference performance standards.
Yes,
I'm not quite
okay.
sure where to put that in.
That's a good
but
idea.
Okay, let me put that in. Let's put that on the just parking lot list, Sarah, Laura, because I can't figure out where to do that on the fly. But that's a good list. Okay. Thank you. Good suggestion.
Can I ask one more process question before we quit?
Yeah.
The stormwater, which in your table is, the question is like, do we move this to general bylaws or do we deal with it here? And I have some draft language that we could look at. I haven't written it down anywhere. I'm just not sure how to proceed on that. And maybe we're not dealing with it until the fall, in which case I'll just let it sit, but I wanted some direction on how you'd like me to work with that.
So I think I also asked Sue to check with Chuck Dam, the DPW director, about what it was that we needed for compliance with. So maybe a two-step thing where we just be compliant with the rules. But if we're going to do that, we might as well make it better. So if you want to give a draft that we can put and that we can look at, we're going to talk about schedule next. So it's and I think whether we have the scope to do that is
Okay.
debatable.
So what I've been using for draft is I've been looking at a number of municipal regulations, but the one that I think is most relevant for performance space that I've found is Devon's. The Devon's, I forget what the whole term of the establishment zone or whatever they call themselves, but and Sue, you may be familiar with it. So that was recently updated in 2021 and has a lot of performance criteria in it. And their kind of their mission is to be both streamlined for permitting, to make it as clear and as easy to follow for potential developers, but also they have a lot of environmental, performance criteria that moves away from the sort of older type of zoning. So I haven't written anything, but if Sue or anybody else wants to go through that with me and say like, which ones of these do we think apply? Then we could kind of pull from that, which is the same thing I've been doing from a lot of like section 6 for the performance requirements. I've been looking carefully at that and a couple of others as well. I can upload them to the SharePoint, whatever might be useful.
I think it would be great to have a sort of Manchester specific version that we look at.
Definitely. Yeah.
In terms of so at least my personal view, and then I'll let other people talk, is that that one is very most important for the LCD larger developments.
Mhm.
The proposed cell signaling development or any other developments that would come in the LCD are not before us yet. So in theory, we would have the time to make that amendment in the fall, because they're not going to be in front of us with site plan review till sometime
If
after
it
that.
goes in our general bylaws, then
And it
is it,
then it could go in general bylaws also. But in terms of timing and the
Yeah.
urgency, besides whatever Chuck's compliance issue is,
yeah,
I'm thinking it's less urgent. And to Anne's point about
yeah.
these meetings, and so why don't
That's
you
all I
come
was
up with-
looking for. If I don't need
Yeah,
to
what-
try to push this through right now, I won't, but I do think it certainly applies to large projects and special permits, but it could be relevant for, other development as well,
thanks.
because it is good practice, stormwater management, green infrastructure kinds of stuff.
Absolutely. All right, let's table
Thank
that
you.
for the moment. Maybe take that up a little bit Monday. Think a little bit more about that, everybody. I'm
I'm
gonna,
happy, sorry, I'm happy to share, DPW has a draft bylaw that doesn't make huge changes, but does get DPW into compliance with their discharge permit requirements. I looked through them. It's the changes are pretty light from what's there currently. So I'm happy to share that with Laura. And then again, I think making the larger change might be another issue on its own. So I'll share that with the
so I
board.
think if we're gonna move that either of those changes forward, it has to be written soon as a article and a motion, so that we can figure out where we're gonna fit it in the bylaw. So if we've got a good model that, I'm all for it, but it's just no amount of time. Okay,
Well, right
let's
now, I'm sorry, right now it's already in there, so it'd just be a revision, right? So it
Right.
It's
fits
in the
with-
zoning or it's in the general bylaws?
It's in
right
the
now?
zoning right now.
Yeah.
Okay, because it looked like it had come out. Okay,
We're planning to move this, correct?
that was my question. One of my questions.
Well, we have stormwater as one of the items we have on our list, but we don't have anything specific yet.
Well, the idea is to move it to the general bylaw.
Move it to the
because-
general bylaws.
Yeah.
That's-
Yeah, because if it's in zoning, if someone's in breach of it, we can't do anything unless they ask for a building permit.
Right,
But if it's in the general bylaw, it can cover anything, so.
right. So that's
Now
where it
we-
gets a
we,
little tricky.
We have Chuck coming in on the 14th. Do we want to extend him a little bit and talk a little bit about this?
And that would be helpful to get me going. I need some help
Can we
on.
wait that long, Laura? I mean, if we're gonna, it's the 14th.
So
Oh,
let me,
are we trying to change the general bylaws now too? I don't know.
No,
I mean,
I
I have
think
a
we
place
wanna
to
move-
start. If Sue and I work together on it, I'm sure we could get somewhere, but
Yeah.
I'm not writing this stuff myself from scratch. I'm looking to
Right.
precedent.
well, let me just,
Can I
give a-
ask a process question on that? If we're proposing moving the stormwater or the bylaw, yet there's changes to the bylaw, that becomes then the Board of Selectmen having public forums on that, correct?
probably.
Okay.
So it may realistically be impossible if there's an April 4th town meeting. So this, I promised that we would come back to this. I don't really want to debate it too much right now. But this is essentially, I think, the only path pretty much to a April 4th town meeting. The change from what we talked about before is that in February, Ron and I talked about making our first public hearing on a regular meeting date, February 28th, rather than a special meeting, which would have to be February 22nd, which is vacation week. And this is outside of vacation week. And then if we need a second meeting, and given the volume of what we're talking about, we may need a second meeting the next night, which is a Tuesday. Monday is February 28th and Tuesday is March 1st. Then when you work back from that, we basically need to finalize what we're gonna do by the February 7th. So that we can get it published for public notice, get a version out to the public, and so forth. I'll put this on the SharePoint. So we're pretty compressed here. We made a lot of progress tonight. But I think I will send out a email. I'm going to suggest that we stop for tonight, that we take up basically section 6 of our current bylaw and the changes we want to address there. We've parsed out some of them, and Laura's made some great comments in those sections. And that we also, one last thing I'm going to share, just sorry, the scope of what we're trying to, oh, sorry. One last thing, I'll stop. So this is the sort of what we said we were going to do. We got through 1 through 4 tonight. I'm going to suggest we table junk cars, even though it's just, the reason is that to actually move something to the general bylaws, maybe there has to be a, does there have to be a hearing that's outside of us? Or can we have to find that out. You have to actually do 2 warrant articles, because you have to amend the zoning with 2/3, and then you have to move to the general, amend the general with a majority. So anyway, I'm going to suggest we table junk cars for the moment. We've done curb cuts. We've done 1 through 4. We've done section 8. Oh, sorry. Yeah, 8. And we have not done accessory dwelling units. We haven't done stormwater, and we haven't done non-conforming uses. Non-conforming uses, nor have we done residential cluster. And I'm going to suggest that we prioritize the non-conforming uses and the general administration, general requirements, because that's where the material that would affect these large developments, it exists. That puts accessory dwelling units into something that we should talk about and then decide, not tonight, what we want to do with. So we will talk about accessory dwelling units on Monday and think about whether we have the bandwidth to move that, or any of these others, to town meeting on April 4th. So the next meeting, we're going to talk about accessory dwelling units, those in yellow, and the sections that are currently in section 6, which are non-conforming uses and general requirements. I'm going to suggest that we table adult entertainment for lack of time. Is this making any sense to anybody, or is everybody asleep?
So one question I have is that when you say table, do you mean it will go, it'll just stay as is in the
Right. No, we won't make changes to it. Adult
And then some-
entertainment is not defined, and Mark Bobrowski gave us standard regs. But the problem I see with that is that it's such a opportunity for people to become completely confused at town meeting. That's my concern with it. It's actually dangerous to not have regulations for it, but it also is kind of a and maybe the strategy on that one is to simply bring it to a public hearing and see if we can explain it well enough to it's it may be, we can talk about that next week. Think about it. Think about whether you think it's feasible. It doesn't affect, putting it on public hearing isn't a big deal, actually, because we're not messing with anything existing. So maybe it's not that hard. So, and we've done changes to the LCD. We're close. So next time we're going to talk about, I'll send you an email, the general requirements, which are in section 6, PB 11, PB 6, which are non-conforming uses, which I think should be pretty straightforward. Accessory dwelling units and adult entertainment. How's that sound? I'm leaving out residential cluster. Chris, is that okay for right now? We could
Yeah,
push.
it's fine for now.
Yeah.
We might want to talk about senior housing, but let's see how
Yeah,
we go.
see how we get. So that's next Monday. I'll send you an email to remind you which sections we're gonna look at. And we still have to finalize these things, but I think we're getting pretty close. So, and we may hear, is Ann still on? Ann, am I right that we're not gonna hear anything from the Board of Selectmen about the date of town meeting until February 7th? Is that the earliest that we would hear anything?
At the moment, the Board of Selectmen isn't meeting until then.
Okay. So unfortunately, we have to proceed pretty much being ready to go for public notice, which is a fairly simple notice. I've got it half written. Anyway. All right, does that make sense to people? It's a lot, I know, but I think we're getting, appreciate everybody's work on this. Mary, if you can send me the definitions. Chris and Mary, I think, are going to work on the use table. I'm going to clean up a few things, flag any additional comments, and try to get, I'm going to remove the 2 columns now because it's too hard to see. Does anybody object to that? We did that just so you could see what was there before. And
The public may want to see something like that.
all right, let's talk about that for just a second, since we have a
Did get some comments from the public today on, you know, what are we doing? Why aren't, you know, why can't we study this? You know, so we need to get stuff somewhere in a public area.
We're still in
as we
draft
go through.
form right now.
Correct. But we have to think about going forward on this.
For sure. By February 7th or whatever my date was, there needs to be materials for the public. Once that public notice hits, then we need to have materials for the public. It's that week of February 7th, that Thursday of February 7th, whatever day that is, the 10th. Do you really think that a red-lined, yellow-lined, whatever it is, version of our current bylaws is helpful to the public?
So my view on this is that it's kind of like people with directions. Some people want maps and some people want narrative. And I think we just have to offer every alternative we can to people so they can pick whichever is easiest for them to view, right? You know, personally, I think a red line version is impossible to read and a little chart is easier, but other people feel very differently. So let's just give them both or all of them.
Well, we got the red line version is really hard to produce and really hard to read.
Oh, I think you do it by section. You don't try to do the whole zoning bylaw as one document.
Yeah. Well, other people's opinions,
I'm just telling what some people have told me. They wanted to see what was the law and what's the new law. They want to see that side by side. That's what I've heard from a couple of people.
so maybe the side by side is, especially if we can take and a little bit align them with adding some spaces, would be easier to follow than a redlined or a highlighted version.
The only problem is the side by sides, you know, like some of them are in section 7 and now they're in another number section. So
well, maybe it's going to have to be a little bit for each.
There's a mapping issue, but yes, I think that's a good idea.
I would add that anything that has any type of quotation mark major change, there needs to be some narrative of why. some analysis of, what's been looked at, researched, whatever, and I guess potential impacts. And so kind of something that, people can understand why changes were made to begin with.
Belgard has paved the way in the hardscapes industry, setting the standard for quality products through countless hours of research and development.
Kind of an executive summary.
Yeah, I'm thinking an
you,
executive
definitely.
summary might be helpful with a bulleted executive summary. In point of fact, we're not making huge changes. The LCD has the biggest substantive changes, I think. Ron, you're on mute.
Next meeting, we may make a little more substantive ones
Right.
with,
That's section 6.
non-conforming and the, ADUs.
Yep.
It could be, right now, yes, but there are going to be some that may be, like you said, hot buttons.
Okay. Well, let's continue to think about it, but let's also think about what's achievable. And helps the greatest number of people. So, okay, with that, I think I'm spent. I'm sure everybody else is too.
Well,
Ron, what else do we need to do? I'll turn it back to you.
Yes, all right. Thank you, Sarah, for all your hard work and all the members that are still, helping out. And it's been great, really getting through this. Sarah, you have a question? I can ask you to unmute, and if it's pretty short, we'll entertain it. Or is that just a leftover hand?
No, this is Sarah Malish. I
Yes, Sarah
think
Malish.
that we have concerns regarding the changes in the bylaws. And we need to make sure that the public is aware of them. And, we've had 41 applications in 2021, which is 64% higher than normal. And people don't seem to like the bylaws. So we need to review them to adjust them as the residents want.
Okay, well, we'll have these public hearings, we'll take their input, and we'll make massaging to do that. Okay, thank you on recodification. Just quickly on the subcommittee and liaison reports. I went to a CPC meeting 2 weeks ago. They approved several projects. I put in your packets, although late today, what projects have been tentatively approved. And if you want to take a look at them, feel free, they're in the packet there. It's a PDF file. Anybody have any other committee or liaison reports quickly to inform the board? Okay, and then on the minutes, I think Sharon got us the minutes late today on December 13. I don't know if anyone's had a chance to review them. And then prior to our meeting tonight, Sharon informs me we have not approved the November meeting minutes. Is that correct, Sharon? And that should have been listed. So we'll do both at next meeting.
Could we get the November meetings put into our all the meeting minutes we need to approve, put in next meeting's folder? For ease
Yes,
of finding, that'd be helpful.
yes. Sue, can you do that? There seems to be an issue getting those in there.
Yeah, if someone will send them to me. I have not received them.
Sharon, you're on mute.
Sharon,
Unmute.
there we
Okay.
go.
I sent everybody the December 13th minutes late today. I will put those on the next meeting as well as November 22nd, and I will get everybody the minutes that need to be approved.
Should we actually do it on the 31st? Is that possible, Sarah, to extend your agenda to do it actually next week since we're way behind?
Sure. Oh, sorry.
And Sharon, could you send them to me as well so I can upload them? I'm
Yes.
not on your. Thanks.
Yes.
Okay, thank you all for staying so late. I'll take a motion to adjourn.
Can I just add one more thing? Sorry.
Yes, go ahead, Sarah.
I know that Mary and Laura and Chris seem to be facile with the SharePoint and Sue, but if anybody is having trouble finding the documents, oh, Gary's left. You know, please.
It's scary.
No, I'm having trouble putting things up on the SharePoint.
Okay. Do you think you just don't have access, or do you don't have? I'm happy to help anybody. The SharePoint does also allow Teams, so you can actually share your screen and do it in real time. So if my elementary understanding of SharePoint helps anybody, I'd be happy to do a half-hour session with them. So.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. I'll take a motion to adjourn.
I'll move that we adjourn.
Second.
Okay. Roll call, Ms. Creighton,
Yes.
Ms. Foley,
Yes.
Mr. Olney,
Yes.
Ms. Tenney,
Yes,
and chair votes yes. We're adjourned. See you next week. Thank you all.
thank you so much.
Bye.
Sharon, I'll
night.
send you an agenda for next Monday.
Okay, thank you.
Going to be able to be there to take minutes?
Yes,
Great, thank you.
yes.
All right, thanks, Ron.
Thanks, Sarah.